Right, Marianne, we're live. You want to take it away?
Good morning and good afternoon. This is the state.
Oh, like having trouble hearing.
Okay.
Sorry. I've heard it before. Maybe it's just speak louder.
That maybe that was the problem I had before.
Oh, really?
Click on the dot.
Yeah,
so I can see.
The what? Sorry. I think what we'll do. That and
It defeats the purpose of being in here in person to be doing it on Zoom.
I think it's good to have both.
It's true. Good afternoon. This is the April 6th meeting of the State Climate Change Mitigation and Adaptation Commission. Welcome. We will start with an explanation of some of our Zoom protocols before we go to roll call and welcome. Revere Wood will start. Go ahead, Revere.
Thank you, Mary Alice. So just to let everybody know that this meeting is being recorded and is available on the YouTube Live, which I will provide the link to in just a moment. We do ask that everybody keep themselves muted unless they are speaking, and we will let you know when there's time for public comments or when we are going to have a specific speaker. I'll pass it back to you, Mary Alice.
Thank you, Revere. Let's see. I'll start with a roll call. I'll call the entity, since we're almost all ex officio members, and if you're an alternate for the member, go ahead and introduce yourself. First, Oha.
Here. Sorry, I'm Sylvia Hussey with OHA.
I think I see Sylvia.
Yeah.
I'm here.
She did, yeah, she spoke.
But we can't hear it.
Oh, wait a minute.
Yeah.
You can have one computer in the room unmuted.
Yeah.
And so,
This is a technical problem if I can't hear them.
no, I know,
talking.
it's something we're still working out.
Excuse us, everybody. It's been a while since we've been in person.
We're working on technical difficulties at the moment.
Yeah, Revere, if you can switch to your audio, and yours is the main audio.
Okay, is every other computer muted? Because I was having feedback errors.
You know, if I can't hear them responding, then I can't
Yeah,
share
no,
the meeting.
we're sorting that out.
Yeah.
It's a computer coordination.
Okay. All right, hopefully this resolves those minor issues. Sorry again, everybody.
Hey, can I unmute?
Yeah, you
I'm
should
gonna be
hear.
talking into this particular mic.
Yes.
Okay, got it. So Sylvia, Oha, go ahead.
I'm here.
Please let us know if there's anyone in the room with you.
No, there is not.
Thank you. Representative for the Hawaii Tourism Authority.
Hello, Mary Alice. George Cam here, and I'm by myself.
Thank you, George. Representative for DHHL.
Aloha, Nancy McPherson, Planning Office.
Thank you, Nancy. Representative for the Department of Health.
Good afternoon, Marianne Rossio for the Department of Health.
Thank you, Marianne. Representative for the Board of Education. Okay. Representative for the Department of Transportation.
Hello, Ed Sniffen from the DOT.
Welcome, Ed. Representative for DLNR.
Suzanne Case, DLR.
My co-chair over here. Okay. Representative for the Office of Planning and Sustainable Development, I'm Mary Alice Evans. And for the Hawaii State Legislature, Senator Mike Gabbard.
Aloha.
Thank you, Mike. Representative for the Kauai Planning Director.
Hi, Kaina Hall on behalf of the planning department for Kauai, here by myself.
Thank you, Kaina. The Department of Planning and Permitting, City and County of Honolulu.
Hi, Dino Chira, DPP.
Thank you, Dean. Representative for the Hawaii State Legislature, House of Representatives.
There's two of us here, but Aloha Rep Lowen present.
Thank you very much, Representative.
And Representative Tarnas is also present.
Thank you, Representative Tarnas. Representative for the Department of Planning for Maui.
Yes, good afternoon, Jeff Dack. There is no one here in the room. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Representative for DBED.
Aloha, Mary Alice. Scott Glenn, Chief Energy Officer.
Thank you, Scott. Representative for the Coastal Zone Management Program.
Aloha, Mary Alice. Justine Ihipali. I am by myself. Thank you.
Thank you, Justine. Director of the Department of Agriculture.
Oh, Phyllis Geyser, present.
And the Hawaii County Planning Department.
Aloha, Chair April Supernaut from the Planning Department.
Good
And I'm by
afternoon.
myself.
Good afternoon, April. Representative for the Hawaii State Senate. Do we have a representative for Senator Lorraine Inouye? Okay. And the representative for the Department of Transportation's Administrative Deputy Director. If any, no. And then DOE Facilities. Let's see. Phyllis, do you have anybody else? Brian's listed on this.
Oh, he's my alternate.
What's that?
He's listed as my alternate.
Oh, got it.
I'm not able to attend.
Okay.
So just me.
Is there a representative for HIEMA, the Hawaii Emergency Management Agency?
Good afternoon, Chair. This is Luke, the Administrator of HIEMA.
Thank you, Luke. And is there a representative for the Kauai Planning Department?
Oh, sorry, Mary Alice, Kaina Hall, here again.
Sorry, Kaina. I think I'm into the alternates here. So this is, I think we've heard from everybody. Who has not introduced themselves, either member or guest? Members first, or representatives of members? Okay, any guests? I think I see several.
Aloha, Mary Alice. My name is Kiana Otsuka, and I am the Vehicle Miles Traveled and Active Transportation Specialist with the Hawaii State Energy Office. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Kiana. Cindy, are you? No, go ahead.
Aloha, this is Suwan Shen. I'm from UH Manoa Urban and Regional Planning Department. I'm going to share the project regarding the social vulnerability later. Thanks.
Thank you. Other guests?
Hello, this is Asia Yuri with the US EPA based here in Honolulu. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Asia. Ben Holland?
Hi, yes, Ben Holland from Rocky Mountain Institute, or RMI. Here to give a presentation on our new shift calculator.
Thank you very much, Ben. Cindy Young.
Hi, good afternoon. Cindy Young with the Department of the Attorney General.
Thank you, Cindy. Katie Rooney.
Yeah, Katie Rooney with Ulupono Initiative. Thank you for having me, just listening in and potentially testifying.
Okay. I see another guest. So whoever could, I'm sorry, I can't see that name behind all of the team stuff.
Hi, this is Nicole Chernohorsky. I work for Oahu MPO as the Transportation Impact Analyst.
Great, thank you very much. Are there any other guests before we go ahead with our agenda? If not, let's go ahead and get started. We have one action item on the agenda, and that is the minutes for our November, let's see which. November 1st, 2021. Members, if you had an opportunity to look at the minutes in the draft minutes in your packet, are there any corrections, additions, or changes? Hearing none, the minutes are then accepted as distributed, and we'll move on to the report. You're welcome. I normally do that with this number of people.
Move to approve the minutes.
Okay, Co-Chair Chase has moved to approve the minutes. Is there a second?
I'll second.
All right. It's moved and seconded. Are there any objections? Hearing none, the minutes are now moved unanimously to be accepted. All right, our next item on our agenda is a report from the Climate Impacts Road Project Analysis. Our presenters are Ben Holland and Lainey Rowland. Is somebody going to introduce them, Leah? Are you going to do that?
If you have the computer, we can just let them.
Great, go ahead, Ben and Lainey.
So Lainey is actually unable to join me. She just recently left RMI, so it will just be me today. So 1 second here. And can you remind me real quick how much time I have?
We're asking for 10 minutes.
Okay, great.
Sorry to interrupt. Maybe I misread the agenda. I thought that the presentation that we were doing would be earlier up. Is it at the end? Just some of us have hearings to go to.
Are you talking about the second presentation on
yeah,
climate
sorry,
change
we
and
skipped-
vulnerability framework?
We skipped the informational updates from commissioners.
Oh, okay, you're right.
Sorry, Ben. Sorry.
I can, yeah, no problem. I'll stop.
Okay, my fault, my apologies. Commissioners, we're going to hear from updates from those of you who would like to provide an update, not mandatory. Go ahead.
So sorry, we were requested to give a legislative update. Sorry that doesn't seem clear on the agenda, but we have a PowerPoint prepared that
Excellent.
Senator Gabbard and Rep. Tarnas and I were going to present.
Great, why don't you carry it away?
Okay, I will share my screen and Senator Gabbard is going to start us off.
Okay, so aloha kako and mahalo for inviting us to give a legislative update today. Here's our legislative team, which as you can see is very well represented by Hawaii Island lawmakers. Unfortunately, Senator Inouye wasn't able to make it today, but I'll be speaking, I'll start us off with I'll talk about 10 bills. So let's get started. Number one, carbon sequestration, SB 3325. The purpose of this bill is to establish the Hawaii Carbon Smart Land Management Assistance Pilot Program to incentivize farming and land management practices that sequester carbon, unamended. Number 2 is the Compost Reimbursement Bill, Senate Bill 3004. Purpose of this bill is to establish and put in funding for a compost reimbursement program and also a compost reimbursement program manager position within the Department of Ag. That also passed out yesterday out of the House Finance Committee, unamended. Third is the Solid Waste Management Plan, HB 1526. Purpose of this bill is to require each county to incorporate into its next integrated solid waste management plan revision a plan to divert all organic waste produced by facilities that meet a certain threshold and appropriate funds to reimburse the counties for incorporation of the new requirement into their plan revisions. And the status of this is that it passed the second reading on March 24th, and it's been referred to the Ways and Means Committee in the Senate. Number 4 is composting in ag districts, HB 1992. The purpose of this bill permits composting and co-composting operations in ag districts and puts in money for an environmental health specialist position in the solid and hazardous waste branch of the Department of Health. And just got word this morning that our Senate Ways and Means Committee will schedule a hearing for HB 1992 this coming Friday, April 8th. Number 5, Healthy Soils Program. That's Senate Bill 2989. Purpose of this bill requires Department of Ag to establish a program special fund. This measure will provide assistance to and create incentives for farmers, ranchers, and landowners to take carbon negative actions and implement farm management practices that contribute to healthy soils. Finance Committee in the House passed this on April 4th with amendments. Number 6 is the Farmer Apprentice Mentoring Program. It's SB 3197. Purpose of this bill is to establish and appropriate funds for the Farmer Apprentice Mentoring Program under the Department of Ag to support farmer mentors in training apprentices on methods for improving soil health by using the whole farm system approach. That also passed House Finance on April 4th, unamended. Next is the Food Hub Pilot Program, SB 2218. Purpose of this bill is to require Department of Ag to establish a 5-year food hub pilot program to increase access to local food. It provides for the award of grant funding to qualified applicants wishing to establish or expand a food hub or to provide certain technical assistance. That also passed the House Finance Committee, unamended. So for the 6 of the 7 bills that I just mentioned, the next big voting day will be this coming Tuesday, April 12th. So if you have any amendments that you'd like to be considered, let us know and we'll see what can be done during conference committees, which will be from April 18th to the 29th. And then here's the last 3 bills did not pass. Green fees, that was SB 3192. And the purpose of that bill is to establish a visitor green fee program to collect the fee to allow visitors to visit a state park, beach, hiking trail, or other natural area, and established a commission to allocate revenues from the fund to protect and manage Hawaii's natural resources. Seems like a no-brainer. Tourists should help pay to help keep paradise paradise. The bad news is that the bill died in the House Labor and Tourism Committee, but the good news, you may have seen it in today's Star Advertiser, SB 775 is creating a natural resource management commission and getting $30 million annually from the TAT. That passed finance yesterday, so stay tuned on that one. And then on the next one, number 9 is carbon fee and dividend, HB 2278. Purpose of this bill is to establish a price per metric ton of carbon, erecting a market-based mechanism for reducing the consumption of fossil fuels. The revenue generated would be returned to Hawaii residents in the form of a refundable tax credit. So this was referred to the EET committee first in the Senate. Senator Wokai, he declined to hear it, saying that a carbon tax is needed, but just not now. He said, and I quote, "We cannot increase the cost of electricity and transportation when we're going to see our HECO bills jump 20%, and may have limited access to oil for the next few months. So he's saying that he would like to revisit this issue next year. And the last one is the Green Amendment, SB 2962. Purpose of this bill is to add a provision to the Bill of Rights section of the state constitution to recognize and protect the rights of all people to pure water, clean air, stable climate, and a healthy environment. And I'd like to say mahalo to Rep. Lowen and Rep. Tarnas for unanimously passing it out of the House version out of their respective committees. What happened in the Senate, I sit on Judiciary, we had the votes, but the WAM committee did not have enough votes to pass it out. So that was year 2 of introducing this important bill. What do they say? Third time is the charm. So you'll be seeing this again next year. And with that, I'll turn it over to Rep. Tarnas, the esteemed chair of the House Water Land Committee. Unfortunately, I had to take off for meetings in Kapolei, so my committee clerk, Sky, will be online if you have any questions or follow-up. So aloha and mahalo.
Thank you, Senator Gabbard. My name is David Tarnas, state rep, representing the Kohala area, northern part of Hawaii Island, and I chair the Water and Land Committee in the House. So let me just run through several bills that are of interest here. These bills here, the first 3 of them relate to sea level rise, and the last 2 relate to coastal erosion and emergency measures to reduce coastal erosion. HB 1436, very important planning tool to help counties with managed retreat. It's called TDR, Transfer of Development Rights. This actually expands the authority to counties to do this. We actually passed a TDR bill back in the 90s, and the counties are slow to incorporate it. So I would encourage all the counties who are here today to take a look, and you've got to actually implement ordinances to carry out this transfer of development rights in your own counties. But 1436 actually expands the authority to address risks from sea level rise, coastal erosion, et cetera. HB 1669, this particularly focuses on Waikiki. And this measure is to come up with an integrated plan for adapting Waikiki to sea level rise. This is pending in Ways and Means. So it's still not finished its journey yet through the legislature. HB 1672, this actually expands the reasons for which counties can establish special improvement districts so that they could address effects of climate change. That is, it passed Judiciary and Ways and Means in the Senate, so it's poised to go to the full House, full Senate before it crosses over to the House. The last 2 bills on this slide relate to the effectiveness of sandbags. The first one, 2006, encourages, or it basically requires that for any sandbags that are installed as part of an emergency permit to reduce coastal erosion, that you've got to have sewn onto the bag the permittee's contact information and permit number. That way, if they're taken out to sea and they wander around, we know whose bags they are or the material that was holding the sand together. HB 2229 is pending in Ways and Means, and it actually is to do an analysis, a 2-year study to look at the efficacy of these, quote, sand burritos to slow the impact of coastal erosion. They're used often by many, but this study was to actually try to come up with some good data to determine whether or not they're actually doing a good job. We can go to the next slide. These first 2 bills are relevant to us here because of the role that kalo farms play in flood control. HB 1768 exempts the in-stream use of water for traditional and customary kalo cultivation practices from the existing process of disposition of water rights. These are in-stream use, so the water comes into the kalo farm, it goes back into the stream when it's finished going through the kalo farm and continues down the stream itself. these cow farms do actually help when you've got a large surge of water coming down, and so they serve a purpose in flood control. HB 2199 appropriates funds to support restoring and restocking fish ponds. It's pending in the Senate committees, but we actually included funding for this in the House version of the budget. The reason why this is important is that fish ponds, when they're restored and they're operating, they do help to reduce the impact of storm surge, of high surf, and reduce coastal erosion from that perspective. The last two bills listed here relate to impacts of climate change on our forests. HB 1769 appropriating funds for rapid ohia death to research it and combat it and educate people about it. The bill is not moving, but we included funding for it in the House version of the state budget. And then HB 1931 appropriates funds for a position related to mosquito control and DLNR. This is relevant because as temperature rises with global climate change, mosquitoes are moving higher elevations. And they're one of the threats to our native bird populations because they carry avian malaria. And so if we want to save our native birds, we've got to control our mosquitoes. And we can do that through landscape scale mosquito control. This position is going to help us do that. Again, the bill is not moving, but we did include funding for it in the House version of the budget. So we're moving forward on a number of these measures to help address the widespread impacts of global climate change, both on the coasts and higher up elevation in our forests. Now let me turn it over to Chair Nicole Lowen, who chairs our House Committee on Energy and Environmental Protection. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Aloha, everyone. I'm Nicole Lowen. I represent North Kona on Hawaii Island and chair of the House Committee on Energy and Environmental Protection. So these are some of the bills moving through my committee this year. First up, we have HB 1800. So this establishes a new goal for a greenhouse gas emissions limit. Hawaii had a 2020 goal to be below 1990 levels. That was achieved. And now the only other goal is one in the State Planning Act to be carbon neutral or negative by 2045. So the original version of this bill was started at 70% and actually put some language in DOH statute that would have made it actually regulatory. The current, then it got amended down to 50%, which actually lines up with Paris Agreement and Biden-Harris administration goals, and has this goal in the State Planning Act, which is, a little less teeth to it, but still there. And then the part two of the study, this bill is a study that I think will be very important to look at pathways to decarbonization and how to decarbonize the state's economy. So that would go beyond just looking at the electricity sector and transportation sector. It would include looking at agriculture, looking at land use, looking at workforce development and all the pieces that are needed. So this bill is moving on to conference. There were some amendments made in the Senate that we'll have to take a look at, but at least it is still moving forward. House Bill 2423, this requires new construction for state buildings and state highways to reduce the carbon footprint in the materials that they use. And not on this slide, but I thought interesting to mention was a bill that we actually passed third reading in the House on the House floor today, and that was Senate Bill 2295. This went through the Transportation Committee, but it requires Department of Transportation to plan for sea level rise in all future projects and also to adhere to carbon concrete standards. So that would be another bill that would reduce the carbon footprint of transportation projects. House Bill 2089, I think Senator Gabbard said third time's the charm. This might be like fifth or sixth time, but the Senate passed this out clean. So hopefully we can just agree to it and move this. This is like the RPS fix, formula fix, so that, as we move closer to 100%, everything is getting counted, and 100% really will mean 100%. And then House Bill 1522, this was a bill I worked on this year. It's the first time it's been introduced, and it's didn't make it very far, but we'll plan on bringing it back next year. But this would have required the PUC to develop a social cost of carbon to be used at the state level, have that be integrated into the resource planning project of our regulated utilities, and then also required the state to use the social cost of carbon in looking at new infrastructure projects. So this would just help lead to, I think, better long-term decision-making on what the, to go into the planning of new state projects, to think about the carbon impacts they would have to climate change down the road. Moving on, there's a couple bills relating to energy efficiency. House Bill 1801 and Senate Bill 2963 are similar and both still moving. And I think this is a third time's the charm, hopefully, situation. So this is our bill that we've had several years in a row that would require state facilities to implement cost-effective energy efficiency measures. I think especially relevant now with the rising cost of electricity, we taxpayers deserve to have us save money that can be saved, and this is kind of low-hanging fruit. And then House Bill 2255 is another requirement for the state leading by example, and this just requires where applicable that appliances that are procured for state facilities meet the public benefit fee administrator standards. That would be for energy efficient appliances. Moving on to clean transportation, Senate Bill 3158 and House Bill 2090. House Bill 2090 is dead. That was the governor's package bill that would have established a rebate for the purchase of a new electric vehicle for low and moderate income people. Senate Bill 3158 is actually a rebate that just applies to electric bicycles and mopeds. So not quite, two different things moving in the same direction. I think this idea of helping lower and moderate income families to be able to have that same access to the savings that you can realize by owning an electric vehicle is important. But I also support the electric moped and bicycle initiative. And then Senate Bill 2720 is the version of this that is still alive. These were companion bills. And this just looks at the electric vehicle charging system rebate program that we've had for several years now. It adds some flexibility to that program so that the administrator of the program can address market needs as they see fit. They can expend some of the funds on marketing to make sure that people are aware of the availability of this rebate program. It adds single port charging stations as an option, and then also adds priorities. The bill was passed originally the original version of the program prioritizes publicly accessible chargers in multi-unit dwellings, workplaces, and commercial areas. So we add to that priority list, transitioning the visitor industry and focusing on like environmental justice issues and trying to make sure there's equity tied into how the funds are dispersed for these rebates. And then last slide, I thought these two resolutions, which have both passed the House and Senate at this point, and now we're moving on to the concurrent resolutions crossing over. These the Public Utilities Commission helped work on, and these both look at mitigating energy impacts to low and moderate income customers. One through a proceeding at the PUC, and one by looking at establishing basically what would be a state level LIHEAP program that assists low income households with their energy needs. And then finally, I included these bills. We had a number of bills this year looking at plastic waste. Of the ones on this list at this point, only 2399 looks like it's moving. 1642 could still get scheduled today. Theoretically, it doesn't look like that's going to happen. But I thought this was important to include because, as I'm sure everyone knows, plastics are on track to surpass coal as a source of greenhouse gas emissions. Very few of the plastics that are produced are properly recycled. I think it's less than 10%, and those go on in landfills to create even more greenhouse gas emissions. And that's in addition to the host of other environmental impacts associated with all the plastics that are littering our environment and our oceans. And so, this package of bills would have helped to reduce the use of single-use plastics, to incentivize more recycling. And I think 2399 is sort of a halfway step towards establishing extended producer responsibility. So we hope that will pass this year. Senator Gabbard and I are working together on that. He's been very supportive. So that would be a big win if we can get that one moving. And I think that is all that we have. So I will stop sharing my screen. And yeah, please let us know if you have any questions.
Mary Alice, we can't hear you. Please unmute.
Can you hear me now?
It should be working.
Yes, we hear you now.
Okay, thank you very much. And thank you, Representative. We've been joined by Senator Chris Lee, who is the chair of the Senate Transportation Committee. And I'd like to ask Senator if he has any additional comments.
Just hi to everybody and thanks. I think they did a great overview.
Okay, thank you, Senator. Okay, and thank you all very much. Let's go on to any additional updates from commission members. Go ahead and turn on your mic and speak up if you'd like to make a report, and Revere will let me know if you see somebody with their hands up. Okay. Do we have one from Ed Sniffen? Ed, go ahead. Oh, darn. Ed, go ahead.
Hello, Mary Alice. Thanks. And apologize. I'm still trying to get my voice back. So if I sound quiet, let me know, please. Apologize. So I wanted to just give you a feel for what airports, highways, and harbors are doing. Airports and harbors and highways all finished up their vulnerability studies in some way, shape, or form. So for airports, after their study, they're now pushing forward on their adaptive design process. They got a consultant on board that's going to help them move forward on finding out what alternatives they have to address some of the climate change factors that they're seeing on their system. Some of the pushes that they're going forward on this year, they're not looking at finishing this year, but starting them this year, is converting their wiki buses to electric vehicles, looking at their electrical rental car infrastructure, make sure they upgrade those, upgrading their ground support equipment for electrification, looking at seawalls that may be necessary to protect some of their airfields. On Kahului and Kona areas, looking at the Green Tower program. And they're also looking at microgrid feasibility for their airports. For harbors, after their assessments, they're now looking at going in 50-50 with the Corps of Engineers to do a study for their Honolulu harbor to see what alternatives they have for mitigation for impacts for climate change in those areas. It's going to be a big one. So we're requesting some funding from the congressional delegation for this one as well. And as they're doing that, they're looking at trying to transition off of their diesel generators. So they're looking at trying to push towards battery energy storage systems and microgrids on the system. They know they're not going to finish this year because, especially with their new terminal coming up, they're going to need about 2 to 6 megawatts in each area. So it's going to be a big initiative, but they're starting off this year. For highways, we finished our vulnerability study, our climate adaptation action plan. And if you read it, you'll see a lot of it is inward facing. There's a lot of things that we need to adjust internally to make sure that we can affect things externally. So we pushed our policies in place already. That's requiring all of our staff to ensure that resilience is built into everything we do. We put our process in place to make sure that there's checklists that all of our personnel need to follow, from planning, design, construction, and maintenance on all of our operations. But of course, we got to change that culture internally. So we have training sessions throughout. We have a group that's dedicated towards ensuring that resilience is pushed throughout. And we set up a guidebook. So in that guidebook, we're gonna be setting up tactics for short-term, mid-term, and long-term mitigation of impacts through areas. We all know we can't hit the long-term right now all at once. So we got to make sure we're protecting the system and building up resiliency as we go forward. So we're working with Jacobs on that. We're also working with NOAA and Nature Conservancy to look at tactics that we can consider that are both engineering and nature-based solutions. On the JHG side, all of the projects, the policy put in place, all of the projects have to consider goals, strategies, and measures for all projects moving forward. I'm not saying what the mitigation action should be, but I'm saying everything should be considered as we start moving forward in the projects. to make sure that we have all the information that we need for each of the different areas and ensure that we can prioritize. We're setting up a platform with Google. That platform is overlaying our equity areas, so our low-income areas, our climate hazards, our assets, our asset management, land use zoning maps, affordable housing areas, areas for on the general plans, and repeated repair areas. So to make sure that we can highlight portions that we need to repair and highlight portions that we can always increase resiliency in, whether it be to sea level rise or rock falls or extreme events happening more often. This is going to be super powerful for us. Make sure that we can identify these areas and start flowing it out from there. We're also flowing that platform into our traffic safety side because it's so powerful. Our staff did a presentation to OPSD and the other state agencies to talk about what we did to prepare ourselves for mitigations on climate change. One of the biggest things that I want to make sure everybody understands, we've been very successful in getting additional emergency funds from federal highways every year to ensure that we not only build back the systems that are damaged during these emergencies, but we build it back more resilient. So each of those emergencies, we spent about 50% more than we would have if we just built the system back to what it was before. And federal highways always supported it. And they did because we had a plan. We have our resiliency studies, we have our vulnerability studies, and we have our climate adaptation action plan that we can always point to. We just were successful in getting $23 million for Honopi Line Highway realignment. We were successful because we had that plan. When we requested earmarks from Schatz's office, we were successful and the committee supported it because we got that plan. So to all of the state agencies out there, what I would recommend is get your vulnerability studies done and get your adaptation action plans done immediately. If you can get those done, and I will say, if you're looking at the best way to do this, the best way is to find an example, grab it and run, because you're going to adjust no matter what. As you find out the needs of your operations, you're going to adjust more and more as you go. It's a living document, but the most important thing is to get it started and get it done. Thank you.
Can you hear me now? Okay, thank you, Ed. I appreciate that. That's great. Are there any comments or questions for Ed on his presentation? Let's see. Let's start with April.
Mary Alice, one more thing to add.
Go ahead.
Legislators, love the bills that are coming out. Really appreciate the bills that require green construction. Greening our operations is super important. We just cannot be part of the problem anymore. So for us, of course, we move forward on the carbonized concrete already, and that's out there, that's done. We've got the specs to everybody, so everybody can use it already. All of the operations on Oahu have already changed their operations towards carbonization. So there should be no barrier for any of the state or county agencies to use them. Now we're pushing forward and to make sure that we can put more waste into our pavements. So we have a plastic pavement pilot that's coming out in June of this year. We're going to be doing a portion of, I think it's Fort Barrett Road. We're going to be pushing a plastic pavement pilot in that area. We've already worked it out with UH, so they've tested it to make sure we don't have any microplastics that are going into the storm drain or to the ocean. Now we want to check out what it looks like on the workability side and what it looks like on the long-term side. We're also pushing more wrap to be placed into our pavement so we can capture more of the trash that comes from milling the pavement back into the pavement itself. So we can minimize that goes into our landfills or goes into other operations. And of course, we're also looking at a highly modified mix to give us that 40 to 50 year life versus that 25 to 30 that we're getting from PMA and SMA. So we're trying to find these different pavement options to minimize the GHG emissions in our operations by making sure they last longer and incorporating trash into the mixes. Thanks.
Thank you, Ed. I see several hands up. And I'm not sure whether these are questions or comments on Ed's presentation or the legislator's presentation, or whether you want to do an update for the members. But okay, let's assume they're updates. Let's start with April from the Big Island. Go ahead, April.
Aloha, thank you. So we have a number of different initiatives related to this commission. Our general plan, we're underway and nearing hopefully the end of the comprehensive review of our general plan, and it will largely focus on climate change elements, and will emphasize throughout the plan various sustainability principles. We're also working with our research and development department on they are working on a climate action plan and collaborating with us here in planning. And one of the things that will come along with that and feed into the general plan as well is refined mapping of our hazards on our island, which, as most of you, we have many. We also have some CDBG mitigation funds that we will be utilizing to incorporate into a comprehensive code amendment of our zoning code and subdivision code. And so we're looking to thread more implementation options in our regulations to, again, address the mitigation of our hazards. Thanks to CZM with the state and NOAA, we are moving forward and making some great progress on our science-based shoreline setback regulations and riparian buffers. This is also in coordination with the state, USGS, and Tetra Tech is our consultant on that project. We have a VISTA, also thanks to the state, who is with us today attending, Sam Bergstrom, who is charged with helping us to implement climate change and resiliency elements into our capital program, into our capital improvements program. So we're going through that effort right now, and we've learned a lot from and with her, and we'll be progressing as the budget is adopted this year. We'll be looking to even refine it and making more improvements next year. So that's a work in progress. The administration overall is very committed in trying to expedite energy projects, things like getting PGV online down in Puna and also increasing their production. So we're working with them on their EIS that's underway. Our research and development office, the energy section in particular, is working to get our hydrogen fleet up and going. We have 1 of 3 hydrogen buses, 3 that are ordered, 1 has arrived, and looking at capturing hydrogen from the Hilo wastewater treatment plant, as well as the closed Hilo landfill. And then in addition, we are developing electric charging stations that will house 20 buses. So electrical overnight station for 20 buses, which is pretty great. Our planning department has gone. This is one of those small little things that we've taken on and we've been talking about for many years, but we are going 100% paperless. So try not to mail letters to us. We're tired of scanning. So mail, not good. Email, electronic, great. So everything, we have a new electronic system for all of our permitting. And so we're utilizing that. And we are scanning in upwards of 30,000 documents a week to get rid of all of our paper in the office. And it's already lowered our paper purchase, our printer cartridges and things of that nature. So it's our little bit, at least within the department, to lower our carbon footprint overall. And the last piece is that the mayor will be hosting another sustainability summit likely in July, and will be focused on collaborative action and advocacy to really move the needle and look for creative ways to move the needle in implementing the Sustainable Development Guidelines. Thank you.
Thank you, April. Before we proceed to Justine and Nancy, I'd like to ask if there are any comments or questions for legislators who may have to leave now or soon. You can wave wildly, or you can raise your hand in the electronic version. Let's see, do I see anyone who'd like to add a comment or question for the legislators' presentation? Do you see anything, Revere? Okay. Thank you, Rep. Lowen, for reminding me to ask for that. Okay, we'll move on to Justine Nihipali from the state's Coastal Zone Management Program.
Thanks, Mary Alice. I just wanted to share some updates on a couple of projects that the CZM program is working on through the implementation of the Ocean Resources Management Plan. The first, we're very pleased to share that we've selected a contractor and we've signed the contract actually to explore rethinking different approaches to shoreline management using more regional approaches and trying to define regions for looking at facilitating larger scale nature-based comprehensive management strategies as opposed to our current parcel by parcel decision making to help influence land use planning. The next is the work that we're doing from Act 178 from last legislative session. Shout out to Ed. We just recently had a meeting of those departments with operating and management responsibilities over facilities. And we've conducted a literature review of many other states who have also developed sea level rise vulnerability assessments for their infrastructure. And we are working on developing a request likely for our annual report for funding to develop a vulnerability assessment process that can be standardized across the state moving forward. And let's see, we've also submitted a proposal to NOAA to help us to conduct a legal analysis of implementing managed retreat here in Hawaii specifically. This builds on a 2019 report that had a very high level discussion of assessing the feasibility of managed retreat strategies. The proposal seeks to look at our existing policies and regulations that may either support or hinder managed retreat and provide suggestions on amendments or new policies and programs to facilitate the managed retreat options, of which some of the tools, such as Representative Tarnas mentioned, are transfer of development rights, which is certainly one of the tools that can help facilitate that. The analysis includes 2 case studies for a localized analysis, and the project is pending federal funding, but our understanding is that it's moving forward in the process, and we'll know later this summer. We've also engaged with the Corps as well through the Silver Jackets program, a pending project proposal for FY23, which sounds pretty far away, but brings together key agencies for targeted discussions for coordinated decision-making for shoreline management, including beaches. And then I'm also pleased to share that in August, we will have a coastal management fellow. Hopefully, we're going through a selection process later this April. We applied for a 2-year fellow that will look at also what Ed had mentioned, some of the vulnerabilities of the people who are going to be experiencing climate change impacts and assessing vulnerable communities. And I think this might build off of what Suan Shen and Dr. Kaufman have been working on. We've reached out to Dr. Kaufman to make sure that we don't reproduce any of the great work that she and Dr. Shen have already done. And so we're looking forward to building off of that. And the fellow will start August of this year for 2 years for a small investment from us at the state through federal funding. And that is it, I think, for now. Thank you.
Justine, thank you very much. Before we go to Nancy, followed by Dinu Chida, are there any comments or questions for Justine? Thank you, Ed. Thank you, Ed. Okay, let's, Nancy, go ahead.
Hi, aloha. Just a couple of areas that we've been continuing work on. We're still updating our DHHL general plan, and we're incorporating goals and objectives regarding climate change. So that is kind of a big deal because it's going to cascade through our planning system as we update our island plans and other kinds of plans. We also are getting master plans and EAs approved for homestead development at higher elevations on Kauai, Maui, and Hawaii Islands, and we're advocating and securing potable and ag water sources for those new homestead developments. So the blessing is that the Prince made sure that there was land, Mauka, to expand into. And so we have to focus on those areas. To deal with existing homesteads that are at low elevations along the shoreline, we're at the draft plan stage for the South Molokai Shoreline Erosion Management Plan. And if anyone wants to check that out, it's on the DHHL website at plans. You go to the plans and projects and then Molokai. So that's coming along. And following on to that, we're preparing to start a community resilience planning process for a project called Building Community Resilience for Molokai Coastal Homesteads. It's a National Fish and Wildlife Fund, Coastal Resilience Fund funded project. And we're going to be working with the County of Maui and Hawai'i and all other agencies to get that going. Then as far as wastewater, we are conducting cesspool assessments statewide. We're trying to ground truth the presence, location, and condition of on-site disposal systems on homestead lots. We're working with nonprofits to identify alternative wastewater treatment options and potential sites for pilot projects, as well as opportunities for workforce development for our beneficiaries. We're also land management. We're developing partnerships to create and maintain fire breaks in high wildfire hazard areas, and working with DLNR and others to fence important watershed areas and better manage invasive species like gorse and albizia. For education, we're providing regular monthly or bi-monthly updates to our Hawaiian Homes Commission on climate change related impacts and projections regarding sea level rise, et cetera. These meetings are watched live by our beneficiaries, so we hope the word's getting out. And we have started since January inviting subject matter experts with amazing PowerPoints like Chip Fletcher, Tom Jambaluka, and Leah Laramie came and presented to the commission. So we're briefing the commission and our beneficiaries on climate change and sea level rise. And work is continuing, planning and design on an interject solar farm in Kalailoa for renewable energy. So thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. Let's see, Dean Uchida, and then Jeff, did you have a comment or a presentation?
Short presentation, thank you.
Okay, Dean, I want to note that Pam Eaton has joined us from Maui. Go ahead, Dean.
Thanks, Mary Alice. Thanks, everybody. Just a couple of things on Oahu. I want to get you guys up to speed with. First off, we got funding through ARPA. We're going to conduct a managed retreat study or plan for Oahu. Basically, we're going to look at the area around the coastline impacted by maybe 6 feet of sea level rise projecting, and then try to identify the zoning that's affected and how much residential, commercial, industrial, resort, and then look for areas on Oahu where we can replace the land. Hopefully, we can go acquire it, put in infrastructure, and then give people an opportunity to relocate voluntarily. The plan is to be like revenue neutral, so we would basically provide the lots at the cost of acquisition and putting in infrastructure. So kind of lay the groundwork for some type of active managed retreat going forward. We're not going to mandate anybody. We want it to be kind of voluntary at this point. The other thing we're going to be doing is with the Act 16 that was passed in 2020, we've seen a significant jump in SMA permits coming in to the county as well as EISs, EAs. So we actually got approval to add maybe like 6 new positions to our land use permitting division. We're going to create a special SMA shoreline branch within the division just to handle all these issues and be a little bit more proactive on the coastal issues that we're facing going forward. So those are the basic 2 initiatives that we're undertaking on Oahu right now. Thanks, Mary Alice.
Thanks, Dean. Any comments or questions for Dean? If not, we'll go to, I think, Marianne, you were next. followed by Luke. Go ahead, Marianne. Oh, whoops. Go ahead, Marianne.
Thank you. Just a quick update. So at one of the last commission meetings, I had mentioned that the department had posted an RFP for the next statewide greenhouse gas emissions inventory. So I'm happy to say that since that time a contract was awarded to ICF Incorporated, they're the same contractor who did the previous set of greenhouse gas inventories for us. So the is anticipated to start on April 18th. It'll be a 3-year contract and it will result in development of new inventories for 2005, 2018, 19, 20, 21, and 22. It'll also include projections for 2020 through 2045 and updates to the previous year inventories, including 1990, 2007, 2010, and 2015 through 2017. So it'll be just like the last time. It'll include county level inventories and be consistent with EPA and the IPCC Intergovernmental Panel for Climate Change guidelines. So the schedule is quite aggressive because it's trying to bring our greenhouse gas emission inventory as possible, as soon as possible, with 6 new inventory years, plus projections and updates in a 3-year time frame. So we're excited about that. First preliminary data is expected this fall, and then the first draft report is expected in January of 2023. Secondly, I wanted to mention some upcoming work that Dr. Diana Felton and the Hazard Evaluation and Emergency Response Office are beginning in developing a climate and health profile for Hawaii. So other states and locations have developed such profiles such as Oregon, New York, San Francisco. The profiles identify likely impacts of climate change and associated health outcomes in populations and locations especially vulnerable to these health impacts. So right now the work is at the very early stages, but we're looking forward to sharing more about it as the work progresses. And then lastly, I wanted to mention the department's strong support for HB 1842, HD2, which establishes a climate change and human health adaptation specialist within the DOH to ensure healthcare and public health strategies align with environmental and energy adaptation efforts and mitigation activities. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marianne. Let's see, Luke, can you wait for Jeff Dack? I think I told him that he could go first before you. So Jeff, go ahead, and then followed by Luke. Oh, followed by Luke.
Sure, thank you. A few years ago, it was 3 or 4 county departments started work on sea level rise vulnerability assessments. Those have been completed or pretty close to it, at least including our Public Works Department, water, and our wastewater wastewater division. Using the earlier analogy of X number of times is a charm. We're going to be looping back to our Maui Planning Commission after doing some more public outreach soon on shoreline rules update that we've been working on for quite a number of years. We had some good feedback from stakeholder groups, including their high-powered attorneys about last fall, and have responded, made modifications to the draft rules in response to those comments. And again, we'll be starting public outreach and then back to our commission soon with the intent for adoption of updated shoreline rules by the end of the year. And that will be a significant step towards managed retreat. Again, continuing the numbers of X rounds are a charm. Just as April announced from Big Island that they have gone digital permit processing, County of Maui's stopped accepting our last paper applications or any kind of development related permitting actually a week ago yesterday. That includes 6 departments and divisions. And we are going live with that with the same software company that Big Island's using beginning on April the 18th. So all digital processing, no more paper documents, no more logs being transported back and forth between plans examiners, et cetera, et cetera. I see April smiling. So yeah, going live with that, but it's quite a rollout that's been in progress for 5 years, but it's happening. Then our Office of Climate Change and Resiliency and Sustainability in the mayor's office has been very active, working on an overall climate action resiliency plan. They have a number of consultants on board, and I'll highlight a few of the things that some of the consultants are contributing to in that overall progress. There's a resiliency hub analysis being done for 4 sites in the county, work by a consultant to identify and prioritize additional candidates that would ultimately create a resiliency hub network across the entire county. We have folks who will be doing climate vulnerability assessments to serve as foundation for resilient strategies in the Climate Action Resilience Plan. Another consultant is working to on our online Esri Hub dashboard and portal development of visualization tools and graphics for other scopes of work and enhanced global carbon analysis. We have another firm that's doing what they refer to as a whole systems approach in supporting the county in developing implementation of climate change sustainability resilience programs, including a heat map index, resilient housing work, planning for renewables. And then we have, Pam Eaton from Long Range Division is also on the meeting today, and I understood she was going to be reporting on their work on a transit development program. I'm not sure if now's the time she'd like to do that, but I see she was invited by Kayana to do that. That's all I had. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Pam, can you let Luke Myers go first, because I had told him he could. Okay, thank you. Luke, go ahead.
Yes, ma'am. Good afternoon, Chair and everyone. From HIEMA's perspective, I kind of feel like this is a rerun from last meeting. But we did have another disaster post the last meeting. It was another flooding event. So in the last 4 years now, we've had extreme flooding leading to federally declared disasters, which kind of shows the importance of not only the long-term and the midterm, but the immediate with some of these events. We had obviously 8 inches of rain on Oahu, flooding, almost setting a record in downtown Honolulu. And then 10 to 15 inches up in Maui. One of the things that we did during this event, which hasn't been done in a number of years, in our resiliency branch, we sent a hazard mitigation survey team of federal and state partners, not only to look at the damages, but to look at mitigation measures that what went right and what went wrong. And we had a lot of conversations about climate and areas along the coastline, but we are seeing obviously a lot of flooding outside of MAP flood hazard areas. And in the Kula area, the Maui Meadows, and in downtown Honolulu, with these record rainfall events, we saw culverts that obviously were built over 50 years ago that cannot handle these type of extreme rain events, areas outside of MAP flood hazard areas. And in downtown Honolulu, we've seen a lot of infrastructure flooded that was subsurface. So we know that these events are becoming more common, and from the HIEMA side on the response, recovery, and mitigation perspective, we're trying to look at it now from capturing some lessons learned besides just doing our traditional recovery and mitigation programs. The other one I'll just mention, there's a House Bill 1588. There's the Storm Act on the federal level, which allows states to set up a revolving loan fund to match FEMA mitigation grant programs. So there's one other state out there who has established a state revolving loan fund for hazard mitigation. We have worked with Representative Ichiyama on a bill that's out there right now. It's House Bill 1588. Hopefully this will help our potential state agencies and local jurisdictions with match We basically would use some state funds with the federal funds, and either the 25% match or another percentage would be paid out in a low interest loan over 30 years. So FEMA is trying to be a little more creative with financing a lot of long-term infrastructure projects under at least the FEMA umbrella. And we're excited to hopefully see that pass. The last thing, I'll just kind of a call to action for this group. I may have mentioned the last couple of times. So we have the State Hazard Mitigation Plan, which makes us eligible for federal funds. It's fascinating in this meeting, listening to all the various resiliency funds and assessments that are being done. Obviously from the Hawai'i side, the 4 counties and the state have and need approved mitigation plans for federal dollars, mitigation and recovery side. So we continue to work that area. We are about to award to a consultant for the update of our 2023 hazard mitigation plan. But I think as we look at risk assessments, not only community profile, in particular, the social lens and the infrastructure, I must have heard 5 or 6 different vulnerability risk assessment topics going on that the GIS, Justine's head shaking, the GIS side of me is just, I really think we need a call to action to, from many years ago as a planner, we need a data clearinghouse for the state of Hawaii. We are, I think, stepping on each other a little bit when it comes to these areas, especially with the resiliency dollars. We all have our kind of perspectives, but it is the same people, property, and infrastructure and environment that we are all putting a little bit different lens on from a hazard vulnerability perspective. And then we're codifying that in documents, somewhat new working groups, and then shaping that message to a number of local, state, federal, and private partners. So maybe we can have a larger conversation about some type of vulnerability clearinghouse that, as Ed said, some GIS related, because I just think that we're all shooting in a little bit different directions, and I think that there could be some great efficiencies as a product of this. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Luke. Pam? Yeah, go ahead, Ed. Go ahead, Ed.
Real quick. Luke, I totally agree with you, and that's why we're building the platform. We'd love to add everybody's layers to it, but we'll reach out. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ed. Pam, followed by Scott Glenn.
Luke, I love hearing this because I spent 20 years as a state hazard mitigation officer in Rhode Island and put together the first ever community vulnerability assessment using GIS. So I am with you. Any help you need, let us know. Kiana, thank you for the invite. I feel like an interloper, so I'll make this quick. Mary Alice has heard me say this a couple of times, but I was invited to talk about our TOD work because in the context of mode shift with regard and active transportation, in other words, getting cars off the road, reducing the amount of energy. We finished today the Kaimana Community Corridor. We had our final project team meeting. Next week, the action plan is going to go online. And some of the things that we identified after listening to you all that sort of relate is we have a lot of policies and actions with regard to mode shift, opening up sidewalks, connecting sidewalks. And I'm going to say it again, Ed, Robin was absolutely wonderful because the Kaimana Community Corridor, of course, is a state road, but possibly utilizing some of those easements for bikes and so forth. For the first time ever, Maui Bus is going to be locating 5 bus stops along Kahumanu Ave. So that's a bit exciting, trying to get people off the road. We have a transit hub. I worked really hard with Mary Alice's committee, as a matter of fact, the TOD Interagency State Council. And because of that group of folks, we got $2.5 million, and they built the Central Maui Transit Hub. On the other end is really the seat of county government, state and federal. So it's sort of a spine. So we're trying to get more cars off of the most heavily traveled road in all of Maui. A couple of active transportation things I think Kiana might have been interested in, and that is War Memorial is a major commuter area where folks who live in central Maui get on the bus and go either to the west side or the south side. So taking a look at War Memorial Stadium and making that nicer, putting in PVs, roofs, but also Keapolani Park across the street, opening up that, turning that whole Kanaloa Ave into a road diet and a complete street. And so that's happening also as a result of this project. Why does this matter? So one of the reasons why it matters is because it can tee us up, I'm hoping, for support with regard to CIP projects by the State Interagency TOD Council, but also we have our eye on federal infrastructure funding. In some of these areas, we also have located and plan to build affordable workforce and market housing because you need the full formula. But our next transition, if you will, is to the Central Maui Community Plan update. So we're going to literally in the next month or two be transitioning into that work where we can apply a lot of this good work. And then once we get into that, we're talking about areas that, you know, I know Jeff will do a great job of representing here, and that is Kahului Harbor and some of these other areas where we do get into some storm surge and coastal issues and water, climate change issues and so forth. So those are some of the act that we're doing right in Central Maui. We also got, thank you, Mary Alice, we also got a $500,000 grant, which we are kicking off in 2 weeks to do the West Maui TOD corridor. And we've already completed the community plan. And many of you probably know, and I'm sure Jeff has told you, that in that community plan, we have many, many policies. And thank God for Jeff and his team who helped us write these policies dealing with sea level rise along West Maui. So that's kind of flipped, but I think it'll be easier, and that the community plan is done. Hele Mai Maui, our long range transportation plan, is done. So those are our blueprints. Ed knows his favorite road, I'm sure, in the state, Honopialani Highway. I cannot keep him off that road. He just keeps wanting to visit. So we'll be doing a lot of work with that, which will be a lot of fun. I'm excited, and everybody else is really excited to kind of go in. The main key there is to really looking at things, much like you guys are talking about. Let's not get all of these tourists in their cars. Let's have these shifts between Lahaina and Kapalua, maybe on bikes, doing bike paths, the West Maui Greenway. So with this perspective, we're talking about lowering GHGs and gases and all that kind of stuff, and also dealing with those areas in West Maui that are obviously very vulnerable to coastal flood risk. And that's it.
Thank you, Pam. And I think we need to thank the legislators for the for the TOD Council investment.
We should. Thank you, Mary Alice. Yes.
All right.
Thank you.
So Scott Glenn, and then we'll open it up for the next person. Go ahead, Scott. Scott.
Thank you, Mary Alice. This is all great to hear the work everyone's doing, especially on energy and mitigation. So in many ways, we're partnering with folks on many of these projects. So we're really excited to hear these results. I'd like to just share a few things that have happened globally and then more locally here at home since our last meeting in November. In particular, the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the United Nations official body for tracking the science around climate change, in February released a report on adaptation and vulnerability. That's the 2022 February report. And interestingly, they introduced a new term that they started using called climate resilient development, which is development that takes into account both mitigation and adaptation. Because I think so many of us who work on the ground know that you can't just do one without the other. And really, we try to do things to benefit both. So that's a term that's been starting to be introduced into the climate change circles. But they also noted that we have some really big challenges ahead of us for adaptation. And then on Monday of this week, the IPCC just released their mitigation report. And it really laid out the scale of the challenge in front of us. They basically identified that we are on a pathway right now to not avoid 1.5 degrees increase in global temperatures. And for us to do that without going over 1.5 would require us to reduce global emissions by almost 50% in 2030 compared to 2019. So right now we're having discussions about decreasing 50% compared to 2005 levels. And so what the IPCC just said is really it needs to be 50% compared to 3 years ago's emissions. So this is the scale that's in front of us for mitigation. And if we're not able to actually tackle that, we are baking in sea level rise, flooding, and all of these effects that we have to plan for to be even more drastic. The term of art used in the climate world is called the overshoot scenario, which refers to going to 1.5 degrees or 2 degrees and then going over it, and then using negative emissions technologies such as carbon sequestration to bring the temperature back down. And unfortunately, what happens in that scenario is that while you go over, the world continues to heat up during that time, even after you start to bring the temperature back down. The effects of climate change have been baked in for decades. And so we need to, as islands especially, do what we can to encourage the world to not drown us and to avoid the overshoot scenario as much as possible. Which is one of the reasons why Governor and several of us who went to Iceland in November to Scotland to COP26 to emphasize the need that we can't just go for net zero, we have to go beyond zero. And we need the world to raise their ambition as well, because we can't mitigate or we can't adapt ourselves out of a world in 3 degrees or 4 degrees Celsius increase in temperature. So unfortunately, the IPCC just said on Monday, that's still the pathway that we're on. And that all of the commitments that the world has made are still not enough to keep us under 2, much less at 1.5. So it's a big challenge for us. We're still digesting the report ourselves. As I said, it just came out a couple of days ago, but it's pretty grim. And it says that the only way that we can really get out of it is immediate abatement of emissions, and also through doing what's called CDR, carbon dioxide removal. So I think it underscores some of the bills that were presented earlier in the legislators' presentation on carbon sequestration and regenerative ag and the roles that that can have, both here in Hawaii and globally. And then also as the Energy Office, after COP26, we stopped by Iceland to do some investigation of their actual net negative emissions power plant, where they've combined geothermal electricity with a direct air capture and geologic sequestration of CO2 to create power, pull CO2 out of the air, and lock it away underground forever. And we're starting to investigate whether that's something that's feasible for Hawaii. So we're really excited about the potential around that, but it's still kind of in early steps for us. Coming back home a little bit more as well, you know, we're here in Hawaii focused on retiring our last coal plant. So that date is September 1st for that here on Oahu. We are on track to retire it. We have several projects underway to replace that energy. One of them has started construction. So we're really excited. It's done its energizing test. And so that's a big milestone in that effort. And for our colleagues in Maui, Hawaii, counties, we've been hearing requests to assist you all with coordinating the renewable energy projects needed for your islands to help replace the fossil fuel plants over there. And we have a budget request that's being considered by the legislature to help us have the bandwidth to be able to extend that service to your counties as well, which we'd very much like to do. We think it's really important and valuable to be able to work much more proactively with you guys to coordinate these projects. And then I'd just like to close on the comment that Luke made. We're working with Haima on critical energy infrastructure, and we actually have a request for proposals out on the street right now to help us pull together the GIS data, mapping out where our critical energy infrastructure is and what our vulnerabilities, risks, and possibilities are to better protect our energy data. And so we fully agree, Luke, and I'm glad we're able to work with you in a good way on that. And I'm looking forward to how that plays out. But I think the more we can get others as well folded into the critical infrastructure discussion, I think the better off we'll all be. So I'll pause there and thank you, Mary Alice.
Thank you. I'd like to ask my co-chair, Suzanne Case, if you have any comments or questions you want to add?
No.
Okay, not at this point. All right. Are there any other updates that people would like to make? And if not, we'll go to our first presentation from Ben Holland. Do I see anybody waving wildly? Okay. All right. Ben, thank you for your patience, and I'm sure you heard some very exciting stuff coming from Hawaii, but go ahead and let us know what you've been working on.
Yeah, and this is perfect timing given Scott's presentation. There are comments there. 1 second. Okay, can everybody see the presentation?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
Okay, great. So first of all, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to present this to you all. My name is Ben Holland. I'm a manager on RMI, or formerly known as Rocky Mountain Institute, RMI's urban transformation team. I'm here to talk about our shift calculator, which estimates the carbon emissions impacts associated with highway widenings. But before all of that, some more context. Some of you might know RMI from our work in Hawaii, or most recently a report that we put out, I think about 2 years ago, called Powering Paradise, that was largely kind of a comprehensive or an overview of the great work that you've been doing in Hawaii and the renewable portfolio standard that you created. My work has really been focused on transportation for about a decade. Most of that decade, up until recently, has been focused on vehicle electrification as sort of the critical tool for decarbonizing transportation. However, over the last couple of years, I've really kind of moved into a different direction. Still do a fair amount of work around vehicle electrification, but looking at other transportation decarbonization solutions, which I'll get into here in a little bit. But let's see here, just some background on our team. The urban transformation team is a bit new at RMI. For all intents and purposes, is our kind of cities and regions team. As you can see, we do a fair amount of work as far as working directly with cities. We also established some city cohorts to exchange lessons learned. The two areas that I'm really going to focus on in this presentation are these latter two, those being kind of our thought leadership, basically reports, research, as well as practical tools. The shift calculator is what we'll be discussing. This is kind of a new thing for RMIs. We've been producing more kind of user-friendly tools for understanding the carbon impacts of a variety of policies. Going back to what I was saying around transportation, and this kind of dovetails with what Scott was talking about, but like many other organizations, nonprofits in our space, we've really aligned our work around what the US and the globe needs to do to align itself with the IPCC's 1.5 degrees carbon budget. In the US, we broke that down by sector. And for the transportation sector, our analysis shows that we need a 45% reduction of carbon emissions below 2005 levels, I believe, by 2030. And what that means, the equivalency of that is going from, in the US, we have about 2 million EVs, electric vehicles on the ground today. We need to have 70 million in less than 8 years. And even under that wildly optimistic or ambitious scenario, we would still need to reduce vehicle miles traveled by 20%. That is sort of, this is kind of in keeping with a number of other academic journals and some recent research from, you can see ITDP, Carnegie Mellon, a number of other institutions have been putting out analysis to this effect. I like to highlight the fact that electric vehicles are obviously a big part of this problem, or the solution, I should say, but best case scenario, the most optimistic projections put us at something like 22 million EVs by 2030. So far less than half of what we would need from a climate perspective. So we got to focus on VMT reduction as well. Shifting people to other modes, providing people with better alternatives to owning and driving a personal vehicle. So we started to think about what are some of the key strategies for doing so. Of course, we're going to talk about stopping roadway expansions today, but there's also tremendous opportunity within smart growth, which connects very well with the transportation problem. pricing of roads, street redesign, and transportation demand management. But given that I have about 10 minutes here, I'm going to try to go quickly. Going back, so on the stopping roadway expansions, a little more context on this. We were recently, or well over a year ago, were asked to create a calculator based on some work that UC Davis and the state of California have done to measure the impacts of induced demand, essentially highway widenings on carbon emissions. We were asked to adapt that for the state of Colorado. The state of Colorado has a goal of reducing vehicle miles traveled by 10% by 2030 and very ambitious climate goals. We ran the model just for the state of Colorado and found that under business as usual, the 10 major highway projects that they have planned and intend to move forward with, they will likely see an increase of vehicle miles traveled of about 2 to 3% by 2030. This created kind of a stir within the state of Colorado and generated a lot of interest nationally. So we very quickly turned around and created a 50 state calculator and branded it the SHIFT calculator for state highway induced frequency of travel. If there's time, I can actually walk you through the calculator, but this is kind of how it works. You very simply put in your state, in this case it's New Jersey, select a type of roadway, you'll be given an option of doing urbanized or county, and then you input the total lane miles. Total lane miles is always, tends to be the hardest because looking at tips and things of that nature, it's sometimes difficult to figure out just how many lanes are going to be added to a highway. So we actually looked at some of the projects that you have in Hawaii, looked at the transportation improvement plans, and really kind of focused on these projects. So we've got 9 projects here on Oahu as well as Maui, and worked closely with the state of Hawaii, Ulupono Initiative, just to get the information necessary to run this analysis. So ran it through the SHIFT calculator, and this is basically what we came to. This is, of course, not a picture of Hawaii. This is Colorado, my home state. But using our calculator, we estimate up to about 1.65 megatons carbon emissions equivalent from those existing projects. And so I very quickly kind of looked at, just today was looking at the carbon emissions, or the greenhouse gas emissions report for 2016, which was published in 2019, I believe. And it says there that just for transportation alone, I think total emissions were 8.69. So this is equivalent of something like 19% of those emissions. So a significant increase in emissions under a business as usual approach. So when I say business as usual, a standard kind of uptake in electric vehicles. I understand, of course, in Hawaii, you have a significant uptake in solar as well as electric vehicles. So the number could be slightly lower. Nevertheless, there will be an increase in carbon emissions based just on sort of the effect of induced demand. And just to provide a little more context on this, because I'm sure there are a lot of questions about how do you come to this conclusion? So there's a robust set of empirical research and just very clear kind of observations of projects around the country that find that on average, a 1% increase of lane miles on a highway system or roadway system should result in a 1% increase in vehicle miles traveled. And the congestion benefits that you get from that highway expansion, the research suggests, are typically wiped out within 5 to 10 years. The best, most famous case, I think, that sort of proves this out is the Katy Freeway in Texas. And of course, that's very different than Hawaii, but there's a number of other examples in California and other states that show the same. But you get a very short-term benefit from a congestion perspective, and a very short-term benefit from potentially air pollution because you're speeding up the movement of the vehicles. However, that again is wiped out by traffic volumes returning to where they were, just because of the latent demand that's on adjacent roadways and the ability to use those highways. So this is, of course, a model. It's not, it's not the gospel essentially, but if you look at in conversations with state DOTs around the country, we have found that, really no model captures the full complexity of reality of what's happening on these roadways. This, we believe, though, is the only kind of existing model that really projects the emissions impacts from induced demand for all states around the country. And we're seeing a number of NPOs and DOTs at least incorporated into their forward plans for carbon emissions mitigation. The most recent example being the state of Colorado. So that is actually all I have. I can move to any other slide. I can take questions. So happy to discuss this further.
Can everybody hear me? No.
You don't need to press it.
Okay, thank you. Are there any comments or questions for Ben? Ed, are you looking to jump in there or not?
No, I just turned my camera on because of the note. But I will say, I'm absolutely dubious about these results. I mean, it's not like we birth vehicles here. We've been adding lanes in different areas to make sure we take congestion throughout. And we don't see a 1.4 million mile or 140 million miles in increase in VMT. Just ridiculous. So overall, we're looking at congestion points that we take care of. And the projects that you identified, especially on the Leeward Coast, is to make sure we provide more access into a commercial center we try to build to make sure Leeward Coast residents don't have to drive into town anymore. So taking a calculator like this and just throwing it out there and saying this is your increase is ridiculous from my perspective.
Yeah, I'm gonna clarify.
I'm not done yet.
Okay.
If you guys want to talk more about it to make sure that you're correct in your assumptions, we're happy to reach out and talk.
Absolutely.
But just to throw it out like this and throw out a number like that, absolutely ridiculous.
Okay, well, we would welcome the opportunity. I mean, we're doing this really with every state DOT around the country.
Perfect, and reach out and we'd love to talk.
Okay.
Throwing it out like this, ridiculous.
Okay.
Okay, any other comments or questions for Ben? Okay, seeing none, we're gonna thank you, Ben. Appreciate the presentation. It certainly is, as Ed said, it's thought-provoking. Are we ready to move on to our number 5 on our agenda? Leah, we're good on that? Okay, co-chair?
Good.
Okay. So this is an informational presentation on climate change social vulnerability framework. And our presenter, Dr. McKenna Kaufman with the university and with the City and County's Climate Change and Resilience Commission will make the presentation.
So I think Suan Chen is actually going to make the presentation. Suan Chen.
Oh, Suan Chen. Excuse me. My apologies, Suan.
Oh, don't worry about that. Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks, Mary. Yeah.
Go ahead.
Okay. Good afternoon. Thank you, everyone, for the opportunities to share our project updates here. So could everyone see my screen first correctly? The full screen presentation. Looks good. Okay. Okay, great. So our project is focusing on Hawaii vulnerability and equity framework. And then our project teams includes Dr. McKenna Kaufman, myself, Suan Shen, and Maya Shalavin at the University of Hawaii at Manoa. And also the teams at Hawaii Climate Commissions. So Nia Narami and Alu Hito, James McCannon, and Reverend Wood. So for this project, our purpose is trying to support the equity missions of the state climate commissions by identifying to identify equity as one of the 3 primary considerations for all the climate actions, and also try to encourage all the government entities in Hawaii to identify, recognize, and address any potential inequitable distribution of the potential benefits or burdens caused by climate change impacts and policies. To achieve these objectives, so we conducted a landscape assessment of how social vulnerability data and information are currently being used in climate-related decision-makings here in Hawaii, and also try to understand what are the best practices moving forward for future works. So since last time we presented to the Commission, we did a set of research activities, including identify social vulnerability indicators in the relevant literatures, and then review the best practices elsewhere as well for how do we apply social vulnerability indicators in practice? How do people use that? And then we engage the Commission's Hawai'i members to gather their feedback on their thoughts on application of existing social vulnerability indicators in Hawaii. We also reviewed the local relevant plans and then try to identify how these relevant plans are using social vulnerability indicators to inform decision makings. So based on all these reviews, we found that there's a need for better access to available data. So we accessed all the potentially public available data on climate change vulnerability exposures and sea level rise indicators relevant to Hawaii. And we created an Excel-based guide that brings together climate change shocks and stressors, linking them to the relevant social vulnerability indicators. So these are the major findings so far with the project. So first, we found there's existing use of social vulnerability indicators in some relevant plans. However, such use is still limited. And also the use of these indicators are more at the aggregated and high level. So it's not enough for very detailed decision makings. And then that also limits the general application of these examples. And the second is that it's good to hear that several of the departments are currently having similar efforts in progress. So for example, Justin mentioned they have their upcoming similar efforts focusing on these issues. And some other departments, state and the county departments are also developing and integrating social vulnerability indicators and trying to use them for better communications and decision makings. But despite these efforts, we still hear some of the important voices from our Hawai'i members. So first, we hear there's a need for more diverse, detailed, and up-to-date climate change exposure data. And we hear about people say we will need more frequent data updates so that make it easier for us to measure the ongoing efforts of the interventions. We also need the data at a finer spatial scales. A lot of the data are available at the aggregated level or census tract level, which is not sufficient for making detailed decisions. And then we also hear about we need to customize that for specific use. We need to separate the data and indicators. So there's some of the social vulnerability index already available for Hawaii. However, for specific sector use, for transportation or for environmental or health, they all need different kind of data, and the emphasis are different. So separate data and indicators are generally more useful than composite indexes. We also hear there's need to link specific type of exposures with the relevant indicators of vulnerabilities and with the relevant indicators of adaptive capacities. So it's not just we come out with 100 different indicators, but then it's more important to inform different sectors about what are the potential impacts, and related to these impacts, what are the potential indicators can represent these impacts from equity perspectives. And then if you're trying to making adaptation decisions, then what are the relevant indicators that can guide you making such decisions? We hear many departments are in need of social vulnerability indicators, geospatial data, but they don't have the resources in-house to process such data sets. This is designed to have a centralized state database or data processing capacities to support the individual efforts. So based on these findings, we take her one step further. As a first starting point, we created an Excel-based social vulnerability guide for trying to provide a centralized place to look at existing available data sets related to climate change impacts, exposures, as well as the relevant social vulnerability impacts. So this is one example. So this is one example related to sea level rise impacts. And then based on that, we classify that into two types. One is the impacts we talking about shocks, which is more sudden, more extreme cases, such as extreme weathers combined with heat waves or landslides. How would that have an impact on the society, on the social aspects? Another is the stressors, which is more chronic, mild, but permanent impacts. So we divide that into these two shockers and stressors, and then we're looking at each of these potential climate impacts physically. And then we identify related to these physical impacts, what are the potential unsafe conditions that this physical impact can have in the society from the social equity, social perspectives. We classify this into these general categories, such as higher risk of housing and infrastructure, such as related to income, how would that affect people's capacity to adapt, or affect their dependence on their economic activities that might be affected by climate change. And then related to, is there any special groups are at risk to this specific type of climate impacts? And then historical and other disparities are caused by the historical inequities in decision makings, or mobility constraints, language and communication barriers, and also lack of social equity, social security and insurance. So this is one example about what the Excel guide looks like. So there are many different tabs in the Excel linked to all these different climate shocks and stressors. And then, for example, this is related to sea level rise. And then we have in the sea level rise, we identified this related to sea level rise stressors, all the data related to sea level rise stressors. And then we classify that by the potential physical impacts, such as living in the vulnerable places, or they have proximity to the potential hazardous materials. And then we list all the existing relevant data there. And then on your left hand, these are the web links. These are the data linked to all the social indicators that describe the unsafe conditions of the potential impacts, such as higher risk of housing, infrastructure, dependence on climate sensitive jobs and livelihood, or their income levels. We identify all the relevant data that contain these informations. And in this Excel table, if you click on any of these records here, it will lead you to the website that you can either view the data or download the data. So this is the first starting point of the efforts we're trying to create a centralized place, combine all the existing data. But also we hear many departments are in need of this geospatial data, but don't have resources to process the data sets. So one thing to note here is some of these data sets listed here, they are not in geospatial format. So there needs to have a lot of work to convert this to a geospatial format, and also to be consistent with other geospatial units levels. So we hear the desire to have a centralized state database or data processing capacities. So for the tentative next step, we were thinking about two things to moving forward. One is to work with the department to create a pilot projects for applications within specific sectors. So given there's a lot of data there, but however, talking about specific sectors, specific adaptations, it is still unclear about how could we use that. And that's something we find it's a weakness in both the literature in other places practice as well as here locally. A lot of these applications, a lot of these social vulnerability indicators are currently just using as a communication tool. But how could we embed that into the decision-making process? We were thinking about working with the department for example, for how can we build a framework for Streamline to incorporate that into detailed decision makings. The second tentative, the next step is to develop a user-friendly database and data visualization portal that can support multiple agencies' individual efforts. So for this database, first we were thinking about it's like a geospatial GIS interface, which you can visualize all these different data sets. But more than that, we think it's more important to have that as a search engine, which is you have the database in the back, but also you have an index structure set up so that you can search for the relevant climate impacts you are interested in, as well as if you are different sectors, you can search for the sector-specific indicators, relevant indicators. And also, if you are consider any specific type of adaptation strategies, you can also search about, is there any in the literature, is there any relevant indicators that might support the decision-making for these adaptation strategies. So behind these two, more than just a data visualization, it's also a search engine, it's also a database index. And then after you do the visualization, you can also download this and then convert them to be at the, for example, to make them consistent at the geospatial levels, units, and then download that data for further processing. So these are our thoughts for the next step, but we would like to hear your thoughts on that and your comments on it. And then if you have any questions or thoughts, please feel free to share with us. That's all what I have. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Suan. That was very, that's challenging for us. And I'd also like to thank the team that worked with you. That's Leah, Anu, Revere, and James. Thank you. Scott Glenn, have you got a comment that you'd like to add?
I do, Mary Alice, thank you. Swan, thanks for working on this. And I guess it's a comment or a question for tentative next steps and how the work could help us with some of the work we're doing as agencies. President Biden announced that he wanted 40% of the federal infrastructure money to accrue to disadvantaged communities around the country. And I think a lot of time has been going on with how to define those communities. So there's a recent memo that was put out by the White House Office of Management and Budget that talks about what are some of the criteria to be considered as such a community. And in there they talk about the different things that could be indicators for what's considered disadvantaged: low income, high unemployment, racial and ethnic segregation, linguistic isolation. There's several factors that are in there that I think you also have included in the work you've been doing. And I'm wondering if it might be something you guys could take a look at and do either a crosswalk to see what matches, and if the tool can help us make strong cases to the federal government for competitive grant applications. Mm-hmm. So that way your work can directly feed into the money we're trying to bring to the state to help these communities.
Definitely. Thank you, Scott, for sharing that information. And also, this is one of the things we want to work on once we have some agencies or departments are interested in working as a pilot program. So we want to say, how could we use this data to secure more fundings, definitely to support future projects, and also how could we operationalize this in the decision makings, right? And then a lot of the projects happen at different scales, and their impacts also happen at different, the impact areas also differs, right? How could we quantify that? How could we link that? So that's something we want to work with specific department as a pilot project. And then using that, the other department can also looking at using it as an example to move forward.
Thank you. And I think this also links to an OHA initiative that several of us have been helping with to get better data on a variety of both ethnic and other information about that the state departments collect. Is that right, Sylvia?
That's true. It's part of the overarching data governance work that OHA and a number of departments supported. And it's just simply left-hand, right-hand collecting data and taking that opportunity on the front end to get disaggregated data rather than waiting on the back end. So thanks for highlighting, and thanks for all the departments that are cooperating and helping us figure out stuff.
Thank you very much, Dr. Hussey. Okay, let's see. Suyan, thank you so much. I think we're going to move on to.
We have 2 hands raised.
Oh, 2 hands raised. Okay. Let's see. Ed first, followed by Luke.
Thanks, Mary Alice. Suyan, thank you so much for the presentation. The data is tremendous, as Scott had said, to make sure that we fulfill the requirements or that the priorities that this Biden administration has in their funding perspectives. We have grant applications that are due on the 14th for us. And we're working with the counties to coordinate our grant applications to ensure that we hit those metrics. And we'd love to reach out to you first to make sure that we capture those pieces. Excuse me. But second, to make sure that we operationalize it. And the way we're doing it is making sure that we overlay these different areas to ensure that we capture the EJ initiatives and equity in all the decisions we make. Thank you.
Yeah, please, we would like to see that, and happy to help. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ed.
Ed, take care. You need to, we don't want to lose you here. Okay, go ahead, Luke.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you for the presentation. This may be a bit technical, but as with any risk and vulnerability assessment, the details is kind of what matter. Were you starting with track or block group or parcel level data, kind of to Ed's point, and depending how you operationalize this type of data or maybe the federal requirement you're using this for, from an emergency management perspective, we don't really see a lot of need to go below census tract, but I am interested. The higher fidelity of the data is going to be more valuable to the counties and those on scene or maybe responding or doing specific benefit cost analysis projects, maybe to validate funding. So I don't know if you have any information on just kind of the fidelity of the data that you were developing this around, ma'am. Thank you.
Yeah, so currently when we are combining existing data, most of the data are available at the census tract level, and then maybe down to census block group level. That's the best we can get and easily get. And beyond that, a lot of data are not geocoded. So they are individual, final level individual data sets, but they are not geocoded. There's a lot of efforts needed to do data processing, geocoding, and then convert them to a consistent geospatial scale. So I would say, again, it depends on the applications and sectors. So I totally agree with you for HAIMA, for disaster mitigations, and then for some high-level plannings, census tract level is good. But also we hear from some community groups, nonprofit organizations who are members in other sectors. They mention about they need more refined level data.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Any more comments? If not, we'll move on to item number 6 on our agenda. This is our final item. And I'm going to ask Leah Laramie, our state climate change mitigation and adaptation coordinator, to provide the report. Thank you, Sion.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for bearing with us as we figure out this new hybrid system. Really appreciate it. We just took a pause there to trade computers from Mary Alice to myself. I'm just going to get the presentation loaded now. But thank you everyone for, I know I also asked for those updates last minute. So I really appreciate everybody getting those to us. So interesting to learn what all you folks are doing. It's just really exciting to get to hear from you folks. So I didn't actually have a chance to introduce myself at the beginning of the meeting. So I'm Leah Laramie. I am the temporarily assigned Climate Change Mitigation Adaptation Commission coordinator, taking the reins from Anu, who we miss dearly. Oops, that's my water bottle. So I'm going to share with you folks some updates from what's been going on with the commission. We can go to the next slide. So our current projects include, a variety of different things. We have our fingers in all sorts of pies. Everything from, we're continuing on with our sea level rise work, looking at some mitigation work, and one of our big, exciting, fun things is our Earth Month social media campaign. One of the products that we just have up now is, is the sea level rise disclosure flyer, which is available on our website at climate.hawaii.gov. This disclosure flyer identifies what folks, realtors need to disclose about the sea level rise tools, and that's been distributed. The new law comes into effect on May 1st. We also have an update from our partners. So there's a newly established climate resiliency initiative at the University of Hawaii at Manoa. We're hoping to hear from them next month, but this new organization is going to be conducting investigations of sea level rise and community design, increasing resiliency to extreme weather events, projecting future climate stresses and shocks, marine and reef impacts, and better understanding community exposure to rising heat storms and drought. We're also going to do a cross-disciplinary and integrated research investigation on a range of spatial and temporal scales. We have also been doing a crosswalk from our grants to project bridge, which I hope you folks are familiar with. That's where we take grant opportunities and try to match them with already identified resiliency projects that are listed in state and county plans. So we've been looking at the IIJA funding, also known as BILL, which is the bipartisan infrastructure law, which has a once in a lifetime funding opportunity for us to take in a lot of funding into the state. One thing that the Georgetown Climate Center highlighted was that the funding from this could really be an important part of the U.S. response to climate change, or it could lead to more greenhouse gas pollution than the trajectory we're already on. So we really have a choice here on how to spend the funds. So that's really what we're trying to do with the crosswalk, is to identify those actions that will really be resilient and help us move towards our climate change goals. And we also, the Climate Ready Hawaii Vista cohort has been also looking at
how we can coordinate better with federal agencies to identify when those funding opportunities are going to come out, and make sure that Hawaii is eligible, because often we get left out of the equation for one reason or another. We don't have certain federal lands on our side, and then so this ultimately leaves less money left on the table. Our Climate Month social media campaign is up and running. You can follow us on our Instagram at @high_climate. We have 4 themes related to the mission of the Commission: food security, active transportation, nature-based solutions, and sea level rise. So I think our current challenge is to shop local and look at the different places where you can find local food. And so if you want to follow us on there, you can follow along with that journey and as we come for new challenges. We also have our speaker series, the Ha'oke Kai collection. We had Tina Steege interviewed by Victoria Keener. You can watch that live, or you can watch that on the recording on YouTube. And we also have our first in-person event, which will take place on April 21st at the UH Manoa campus. And we'll be having Leah Stokes come talk about energy and policy issues. And now to the fun part of the presentation. We're going to be introducing, or they'll be introducing themselves, but our Climate Ready Hawaii cohort, which is sponsored by the Climate Change Commission through a grant from the AmeriCorps VISTA program as well. So I will pass it on to Revere.
Aloha, everybody. Oh man, too many computers. Aloha, everybody. Thank you, Leah, for introducing the Climate Ready Hawaii cohort. As Leah mentioned, this is a program funded through AmeriCorps VISTA, which is a federal program focusing on uplifting low-income communities and ALICE communities out of poverty. The Climate Change, Adaptation, and Mitigation Commission, as you all know, shares a similar mission in assisting low-income communities and vulnerable communities and uplifting them out of vulnerable situations. And it's just really been a pleasure to be a part of this program. So I'd like to thank the Commission first before getting started, and to thank our chairs for bringing us on and continuing this program. I've been with the program now for 1.5 years, and it has been a fabulous opportunity. So as I mentioned, I am Revere Wood. I'm the VISTA lead for the Climate Ready Hawaii cohort. I mainly assist in developing and coordinating and doing project coordination and development. Currently, I'm working on the Earth Month projects, as well as supporting the informational events, as Leah mentioned, like the Our Clean Energy Future with Leah Stokes. As well, I provide professional growth opportunities and mentorship to our current VISTA cohort. As I mentioned, I served last year with the cohort as the Community Engagement and Communication Specialist for the Hawaii State Energy Office.
Hi everyone, I'm Katie Pullman. My video is kind of being a little tricky right now, but I'm currently the Climate and Transportation Equity VISTA.
Katie, we cannot hear you.
Okay, can you hear me now?
I can hear you,
we hear you.
Okay, cool. Sorry guys. Okay, cool. Hi everyone, I'm Katie Pullman.
Katie, I'm sorry, you're still having audio issues.
Revere, the rest of us hear her.
You can hear.
We all hear her. It's okay. Go ahead, Katie.
Well, as you guys see, this is Katie. She is our fabulous VISTA. She is the Climate and Transportation Equity VISTA. And, I think technical issues are just going around today. So, Katie, if it's okay, I'll just do your intro for you.
Revere, we can hear Katie very well.
So Katie not only assists the commission in doing a lot of the social media stuff, A lot of the content that you've been seeing recently is from Katie. Katie, is your microphone working? And we are just completely muted. Okay. I'm so sorry. Go ahead, Katie.
No worries. Hi guys, I'm Katie. I'm currently the Climate and Transportation Equity Vista at the Department of Health. Some of my current projects include expanding the Hawai'i Handbook for Immigrants, writing a policy primer for climate smart actions, identifying resiliency projects within the state, and running the Commission's social media account.
Hi everyone, my name is Sam Bergstrom. I am working as a Capital Improvement Resilience Vista at the Hawaii County Planning Department. Projects I am currently working on include mapping current, past, and proposed capital improvement projects and building assets on ArcGIS.
Aloha everyone, my name is Rachel Morris and I'm serving as the Climate Change Community Outreach Vista at the Kauai County Planning Department. The main projects that I'm working on revolve around the planning of the Climate Adaptation Plan for Kauai. The Climate Adaptation Plan is in its infancy stages and we're currently gathering public input and opinion island-wide. I support the Climate Resilience team in organizing and publicizing the open houses and workshops through the social media. In addition, we're hosting a youth summit next month, which is going to be a fun, interactive way to engage youth in adapting to and mitigating to climate change.
Aloha, everyone. My name is Ernest Rogers, and I'm serving as the Climate and Energy Justice Associate at the Hawaii Green Infrastructure Authority. And some projects I'm currently working on include creating marketing plans and accompanying collateral materials for a revolving loan fund dedicated to energy efficiency improvements for state departments and agencies' buildings. I'm also creating a marketing plan and accompanying documents for a collateral support program to help small businesses in need of financing.
Aloha, everyone. My name is Kayla Palmer, and I am the Highways Climate Adaptation Vista serving at Hawaii's Department of Transportation. Currently, I'm assisting HDOT and Google with creating a climate hazard and social vulnerability map that will display locations that are projected to be heavily impacted by climate change. The creation of this map will assist HDOT with including equity in climate hazards and project prioritization. And I am also assisting the Climate Ready cohort with creating a scope of work that focuses on natural-based solutions to prevent the Punaluu Beach Park from eroding towards the highway.
Hello, everyone. My name is Kira Williams. I'm serving as the Energy Affordability and Climate Vista at the Hawaii State Energy Office. Projects I'm currently working on include contributing to an energy efficiency and fundamentals webinar series, supporting the Clean Energy Wayfinders program, and amending a list of LEED certified buildings in the state to support future projects.
Hi, I'm Tommy Hoare, the Transportation, Energy, and Climate Vista with the State Energy Office. Currently, I'm working on a scope of work for a center linking multiple modes of transportation, vehicle miles traveled reduction strategies, and crosswalking the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act bill with the grants to projects bridge transportation plans.
Aloha, everyone. My name is Amanda Ho. It's great to meet everybody. I am serving as the Community Engagement Vista at the Hawaii State Energy Office. The main projects that I am currently working on is supporting the Clean Energy Wayfinders program, which Tommy and Kira both mentioned, and was actually spearheaded by last year's HSEO Vista cohort. And the program is currently being led by Parker Kushima, who is a former Vista with the Hawaii State Energy Office. I'm also working on a community engagement tool for the rebranding of the HSEO website and supporting other community engagement efforts. The main projects I'm currently working on for the Climate Commission are a survey to metropolitan planning organizations across the country to better inform how to incorporate VMT reduction strategies in our decision-making processes, and a policy primer, which Katie has mentioned, on climate smart land use opportunities.
Aloha, my name is Agapito Curiel, and I'm the Resilience Specialist working with the Department of Land and Natural Resources and serving the Climate Change Mitigation and Adaptation Commission through the Kupuaina Core Program. I provided expertise in GIS analysis and map making. I'm currently working on calculating above ground carbon estimates along with water recharge rates for proposed and completed forested fenced areas, along with mapping agricultural abandonment areas across the state to estimate carbon sequestration potential.
Mahalo, everybody. Mahalo, everybody. It's just really exciting to have all these wonderful folks. As you can see, we have an amazing team here. And as an added bonus, we're hoping to get a 10th Vista on board at the broadband, with the broadband Hui to help us with some equity and access to broadband, which we know has a lot of implications for positive impacts on reducing climate emissions. So hopefully we'll have an update for you folks on that at our next meeting. So I know this is the last presentation and you're all ready to get going. So I'm going to just jump right into our next piece, which is the Vehicle Miles Traveled Reduction Toolkit. Next. So we are going to be looking at the rationale and goals of this project, acknowledging all the wonderful folks that have helped us out on this, looking at why Hawaii must reduce our vehicle miles traveled, or VMT, and then going into some detail about the VMT toolkit. The Commission has consistently supported VMT reduction in several statements in 2018, 2019, and 2021, including its recommendation on urgent actions to combat emissions, where it explicitly supports VMT reduction. So we thought this was a good project to take on. The VMT reduction toolkit was initiated and managed by the Hawaii Climate Change Mitigation and Adaptation Commission staff, with funding from the EPA and Hawaii Department of Health and to the Department of Land and Natural Resources. The state will not meet our climate and energy goals without an improvement for the efficiency of our transportation system. In other words, a reduction in the vehicle miles traveled, or VMT. This project was a great fit for the Commission as it's a multi-jurisdictional issue which staff could coordinate and bring stakeholders to the table and discuss. The purpose of this project was to create a toolkit of recommendations and strategies that will help us to reduce our VMT. The toolkit will be used to help to inform decision makers and stakeholders about the benefits of more multimodal and accessible communities. This will hopefully spur action from stakeholders across the state to help us meet our climate and clean energy goals. So we had a lot of great people working on this with us. The project began in May 2021 and met regularly with this expert Hui, which included members from the City and County of Honolulu, Hawaii Hawaii Department of Health, including both the Clean Air Branch, the Hawaii Department of Transportation, Hawaii Office of Planning and Sustainable Development, the Hawaii State Energy Office, Kauai County, and Maui and Oahu MPOs. Sorry, you can leave it there, but just in addition to having the regular expert Hui meetings throughout the project, we also did several deep dives in July and August of 2021 with state and local agencies, including the Department of Transportation, where the focus of discussion was on their mid-range plan, highways division, and state bicycle and pedestrian program. The Hawaii State Energy Office, where the focus of discussion was on the Data and Hawaii Environmental Protection Act, or HEPA, and the City and County of Honolulu, which included the Department of Transportation Services, Department of Planning and Permitting Transit-Oriented Development Division, and the Office of Climate Change, Sustainability, and Resilience. As you know, Hawaii has very ambitious climate goals, thanks to many of you in this room and on Zoom. The state of Hawaii has set a goal of being carbon negative by 2045, as well as the mayors of City and County of Honolulu, Hawaii County, Maui County, and Hawaii County have all collectively committed to 100% renewable ground transportation by 2045. So I'm going to go into a few other guidance that also, shows us how the federal folks are looking at VMT production. So VMT reduction or a proxy thereof is a shared vision for federal, state, and local agencies. FHWA Strategic Agenda for Pedestrian and Bicycle Transportation is a framework to guide the United States Department of Transportation, Federal Highways Administration, pedestrian and bicycle initiatives. As part of this report, it lists in its goals and priority actions a goal to increase the percentage of short trips presented by bicycling, rolling, and walking to 30% by 2035. We talked earlier about the bill or the bipartisan infrastructure law. This guidance is intended to serve as an overarching framework to prioritize the use of resources on projects that will build a better America. The intent of the guidance is also to ensure that the funding and eligibilities provided by a bill will be interpreted and implemented to encourage states and other funding recipients to invest in projects that prioritize the maintenance of existing facilities, maximize existing right-of-way to accommodate non-motorized modes in transit, and projects that move people and freight over those that expand the general purpose capacity of roads and highways. EPA guidance also recognizes that transportation sector continues to be the biggest contributor of greenhouse gas emissions in the US. And within the transportation sector, light duty vehicles contribute the largest share of greenhouse gas emissions. Although emissions per mile traveled have decreased, growth in travel activity has partially offset those reductions and presents a challenge to achieving and maintaining public health. The EPA is concerned with reducing VMT because of its impacts to the environment and human health. The Hawaii Clean Energy Initiative is a partnership between the state of Hawaii and the US Department of Energy, initiated in 2011. The HCEI included VMT reductions for 2015 and 2020, and those targets were again cited in the ICCT DBED report in 2015. Unfortunately, those showed the actual numbers of VMT increased by 14%. The roadmap shows that transportation fleet electrification alone will not achieve state climate and energy independence goals, and that a significant reduction of statewide VMT must be achieved. We've made great progress on electrifying our transportation system, but electrification alone is not enough for us to meet our clean energy goals. Transportation demand will continue to increase without new efforts to expand mobility and improve the prevalence of dense mixed-use development. According to the report Transcending Oil, 100% conversion to electric vehicles by 2045 would increase electricity demand by 33%, which in turn would require additional resources and investments in electricity generation. And if we're looking to clean our entire energy system, that would mean using precious land for solar, wind, or other renewable energy projects that could instead be used for agriculture, affordable housing, open space, and other such needs. The report estimates that we would need to make a cumulative investment of $3.1 billion to increase our capacity to meet the increased energy demand via 100% electric vehicle scenarios. To minimize the increase in electricity demand, state and county governments need to take actions to reduce VMT through the pursuit of policies that foster, connect, compact mid-use development with improved facilities for non-auto travel and implementing pricing mechanisms. The following actions are recommended in the Transcending Oil report. Revise state and county land use transportation policies to incentivize multimodal mobility and disincentivize car ownership. Price the fueling cost of parking and driving. And finally, design public streets for everyone. VMT reduction or proxy thereof is also identified in the state and county plans. Hawaii Department of Health's physical activity and nutrition plans strive to create sustainable change that will transform our communities, schools, healthcare, and work sites to support health of the people of Hawaii. Hawaii County identifies a preferred mode shared scenario that is based off the goal of no net increase in vehicle miles traveled and the corresponding mode share that would be necessary in 2020 and 2035 if VMT were held at the 2010 level. In order to achieve this goal, there's much higher percentage of people walking, biking, and using transit in 2035 than in 2010. a lower percentage of trips made by single occupancy vehicles or people driving alone. In the Climate Action Plan, or CAP, which focuses on reducing greenhouse gas emissions that occur in Oahu, looks at reducing the emissions from large emitting sectors that the city can most effectively influence, including ground transportation, electricity, and waste. The CAP sets an intermediary goal of 45% reduction of greenhouse gas emissions by 2025 relative to 2015. The major challenges to greenhouse gas emissions result from actions affecting vehicle miles traveled, federal fuel efficiency standards, and further adoption of EVs. Within this plan, there are 4 potential pathways for passenger cars and trucks to meet greenhouse gas targets, all of which include reduction in VMT. The CAP presents Oahu's current community-wide greenhouse gas emission footprint and forecast island-wide greenhouse gas emissions to the year 2045, given current policies and trends. So on this slide, we see the 4 different pathways that they've identified within the CAP, and you can see all of them include VMT as a necessary step. Next, we'll look at some graphs showing us how total annual VMT has increased since 2000. We can also see that while it does kind of ebb and flow, ultimately annual VMT per capita has also increased since 2000. And finally, Hawaii Department of Transportation forecasts continued VMT growth into the future. So now we'll really dig into the toolkit. Successful VMT reduction strategies require coordinated effort and shared responsibility across the variety of policy areas, including land use, development, public health, transportation, network planning, and more to achieve noticeable results. State-level policy, cross-agency ownership, and interdepartmental coordination will be essential to effectively implement specific VMT reduction strategies across actions across all the scales. The recommended actions are presented as near-term steps that agencies can implement to initiate and sustain progress towards VMT reduction. So we put these into 3 buckets: articulating a goal and champion change for VMT reduction, realign funds and spending to support policies, programs, and projections that reduce VMT and support mode shift, and engage stakeholders in support of VMT reduction and establish a shared understanding of responsibility for supporting change. So within our first bucket, we have 4 recommendations. The first is to develop and adopt a statewide VMT reduction target. I think that's pretty straightforward. We know that identifying and codifying VMT reduction goals establishes a shared vision to achieve greenhouse gas and climate goals. Recommendation 2 is to identify key state and county agencies to collaborate and coordinate with the implementation of VMT reduction and transportation demand management policies, strategies, and programs. This requires partnerships and collaboration with the state and county leadership to ensure that interdepartmental decisions at the state and county levels are aligned to achieve desired outcomes. Recommendation 3 is to ensure that state and county development plans associated with land use are designated to reduce VMT or at a minimum stay within prescribed thresholds. Incorporating VMT targets and VMT reductions into all plans dealing with land use, including functional plans, supports the alignment of objectives and actions of stakeholders. And finally, within this bucket is recommendation 4, develop and implement a strategy to integrate VMT into project level analysis and decision-making for land use transportation projects. By incorporating VMT and induced demand measures into the project impact analysis, it aligns land use approval processes and transportation project funding decisions with climate action goals. Our next bucket, recommendation 5, channel investments in transportation and land use towards projects that reduce the energy intensity of mobility through the reduction of VMT. So this is really internalizing the full cost of greenhouse gas emissions into the assessment and implementation of land use and transportation projects so that it locks in reductions of VMT and greenhouse gas emissions going forward. recommendation 6, to give people in Hawaii more safe, affordable, reliable, inviting, and convenient choices to get around by funding the completion of our pedestrian, bicycle, transit, and green networks. A robust, equitable, and interconnected active transportation network that includes greenways where residents and visitors can safely and comfortably walk, ride a bike, or take transit for all or many of their daily needs is essential in reducing achieving VMT reductions and making progress towards our climate goals. And in our final bucket, creating a set of discussion guides to educate communities on why VMT reduction is essential, how to achieve it, and the relationship between VMT reduction policies and desired community outcomes. Because many of the necessary strategies that achieve VMT reduction will require a significant shift in the mindset and investments, thoughtful communication that addresses specific questions and speaks to the range of values and priorities among advocates, policymakers, agency staff, and the general public is essential. This will help us to communicate why VMT reduction is essential, to make state goals and translate policy recommendations into messages that resonate with Hawaii's people and agencies alike. So next steps and actions in progress. We're hoping to finalize the toolkit in the next couple months by the end of May. We're going to be working with agencies and stakeholders to develop a work plan to reduce the energy intensity of mobility through VMT reduction strategies and active transportation. Also planning to collaborate with state and county agencies, industries, and local stakeholders to identify funding opportunities to support the work plan, such as through bill. And some things we're already doing are maintaining the grants to project bridge list and doing those crosswalks, which I talked about earlier. We are working on a multimodal hub study for Oahu, funded by Oahu MPO. And also, very excitingly, the Hawaii State Energy Office has hired a VMT and active transportation specialist to help with all this work. And that was funded through a grant received by the Climate Change Commission in coordination with HSCO. Yeah, and then that's all from me today. So happy to take any comments or questions. Can you share your computer? Yeah.
Leah. No. Okay, now, thank you. Leah, that was terrific. And obviously we've got work to do. So let's see, are there any comments or questions? This is our last agenda item, so I'll ask you to keep them short, but we'd love to hear any thoughts you might have.
And Mary, also, I'll just point out too, we have 2 items of testimony that were submitted. We have them there.
Okay, we have packet items that we want to make sure that you take note of. They are a letter to Leah and the commissioners from J. Roger Morton of the City and County's Department of Transportation Services, and giving their support to the Hawaii State Energy Office's Vehicle Miles Travel Reduction Toolkit. And we have, oh, okay. And then we also have a letter of support from Mark Garrity, the Executive Director of the Oahu Metropolitan Planning Association. So just calling your attention to those handouts and that indication of interagency networking for this project. Okay. Let's see, Ed, go ahead.
I think there was somebody with their hand up before me. Sorry.
We'll look for it.
I think it was Nancy. Nancy, did you still want to speak?
Oh, hi. Yeah, I actually just put a couple comments in the chat here. I'm thinking sustained from my previous life studying economics, sustained higher gas prices and you might have an effect on reducing VMT. And, I actually lived in California during and Hawaii during the oil crisis in the 70s when people were waiting in line for gas and people figured out how to reduce the number of miles they were traveling. They bought smaller cars, all of that. But also allowing government, this is self-interest, government employees, to be more supported in telecommuting because we did that for 2 years. And I think that reduced a lot of vehicle miles traveled. It'd be nice to be able to at least do that again on some level.
Thank you, Nancy. And then Ed.
Nancy, totally agree with telework. We're 100% behind it. We're making sure we keep pushing it through HGEA. For the rest, I'll keep my comments short, but we have significant comments that we'll get over to Leah about this toolkit. It's always good to have a lot of tools, but I think the rhetoric got to be correct. When we start talking about our 2045 goals, we all agree that it's important. We, government, had said it. Governor and the legislators had said it's important and we got to move forward. But if you talk to the common person out there, that's the last things on their mind. First thing on their mind is, how do I get to work? How do I get my kids to their locations? How do I afford to live here every day? So if we keep talking about limiting them, if we keep talking about how we're going to increase costs in different areas to make sure we incentivize them to do different things, several things have to happen first. We got to give them those alternatives that actually work for them first. And second, we got to make sure that we first adjust their access to their goods, services, and opportunities. If we can adjust that through the TOD Council to ensure that our commercial areas are in their locations so they can minimize the amount that they need to walk or bike or drive to get to work, to get to the doctors, to get to school, then we got something here. But if we're going to keep talking about how we incentivize them by hitting them with costs, I'm out. All we want to do is make sure we increase the opportunities for access for everybody. Bicyclists, pedestrians, transit riders, and vehicles, and let them choose. Because if we keep talking about it from government's perspective, that we set this problem, we told all the jobs, 80% of the jobs got to live in one area. We told everybody else, if you're rich enough, you can live near it. If you can't afford to live in town, you got to buy property outside. And then you got to drive there. We set the rules. So if we're going to jump in and correct it by saying we're going to make you pay more, we're going to incentivize you to change by hurting you in some way, to me, that's disingenuous. So if we're looking at changing things to adjust land use, to adjust the access to opportunities, to make sure it's easier for everybody to get around, and making sure that we're plussing up the system for everybody, I'm in. I'm all in. Because I think all of us are here for the 2045 goal, to make sure that we are net zero or net negative on our system. But I'm not going to hit the people of Hawaii to do it. Now, I get it. Again, we are here to save Hawaii. But we've got to keep asking ourselves, when we start talking about these types of policies, we got to talk about who we're saving it from and who we're saving it for. If it's for the residents of Hawaii to make sure that they can come back from college and live here, I'm all in. But if it's to make sure that we just address climate for climate's sake and not take care of today's needs, I'm out.
Thanks, Ed. Thank you for reminding us who we are planning for. And our Alice households have to be part of that consideration, as I think our social vulnerability index work addresses. And so I think what I'm seeing is, the complexity of all of these systems as we have unintended consequences from things that are individually desirable, but working together may create inequitable consequences. So Ed, thank you for reminding us of that. I really appreciate it. Scott, go ahead.
Thank you, Mary Alice. I just wanted to offer a couple comments. One, a note about the Energy Office's role in coming into this conversation. When Act 122 was passed in 2019, kind of reforming the Energy Office, we were given among our duties to support clean transportation. And so in looking at clean transportation, we're approaching it from the same point of view as how we look at renewable energy. And for that, we look at energy efficiency first, right? It's the avoiding the need to use electricity for something. And then if we have to use electricity, it's renewable. And I think everyone kind of recognized that that was an easier task because we had a couple utilities, we had the Public Utilities Commission, and we had some key, regulatory levers that could be pulled to move things along, including financing options like the on-bill financing to support the Public Benefits Fee Administrator, which is Hawai'i Energy, and kind of building out, there's an ecosystem of regulatory and financial tools in place around renewable energy and energy efficiency that doesn't exist right now for transportation. And so I think in part of the legislature's intent of assigning the Energy Office to work on clean transportation, it was to look at that and to help coordinate and work together with other agencies and pull these together. And of course, vehicle miles traveled is not just the vehicle part, it's the traveled part. And I think as Ed was saying, people take trips to places for reasons. And so there's a very large urban planning and community design element to tackling this problem. And so, yeah, I think the more we can work together with the transportation agencies, the energy agencies, and the planning agencies to come up with these more holistic approaches. And I think the toolkit is moving in that direction, identifying what are some of these strategies that we can embrace as strategies that bring us together, and then start narrowing down what does it take to move the needle. And I just personally, in my own my own thought is that it's a shame that rail has been taking so long to get built, because I think it was originally looked at as a means to help provide alternative transportation to a lot of families right now that are locked into driving to get from one end of the island to the other. And with it not being there, we're still experiencing this VMT activity. And at the very least, it could avoid VMT growth, if not fully shift people from driving to taking rail. So I think there's a lot of things out there that are going to take some pretty big coordination, and certainly VMT is a symptom of a lot of the land use patterns and transportation patterns we have in place. And those are harder to change and take a little bit longer to change than, swapping out light bulbs and installing solar panels on people's roofs. But we got to do it too. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. I will put in a plug for the Transit-Oriented Development Council, which is a legislative initiative that is being worked on with across all the counties and most of the state agencies with the support of the legislature. And it is a land use planning and transportation and affordable housing initiative. Anyway, so much for plugging a favorite project of mine. We've come to the end of our time. Oh, yeah, Senator Lee, go ahead. There's here, come this way and then talk into the mic there, and yeah, go ahead.
Oh, hey, everybody. Oh, there I am. Okay. Sorry, I didn't get the memo. I showed up in person to what was apparently a Zoom meeting that I could have done from my office. But appreciate everybody's comments on this. This is obviously one of the huge issues, I think, going forward with now moving beyond electricity and transportation. And for the VMT toolkit, that's really helpful because we are, I think, way behind a lot of other states, right? You have California with Caltrans and the California Energy Commission that have done some amazing work in this space, have data and metrics, targets, now funding to do a lot of the innovation and transformation of transportation over there, along with a bunch of other states. We are still, I don't think we even have metrics around a lot of this stuff that everybody's like coalescing around. So that's the first thing. So I think this is really helpful. It's right now DOT's mission to reduce VMT in all the projects they do. And I think it's going to take a lot of work, obviously, to get from mission to execution. And to Ed's point, I think Ed's right. This isn't something that can be done or foisted on people overnight. But I do think as we go through with attrition, we're spending money anyway, right? And we're spending or spending the opportunity to try and build out cheaper options for folks. And so the question, I think, on the thing is not mutually exclusive. Reducing VMT and improving quality of life and transportation means increasing costs. Just the opposite in many cases. That's been proven in a lot of jurisdictions where you can build out infrastructure to provide those options for people to get around far more cheaply, especially in a state where we're paying like 3 times the average per capita to get around than in other places, in other cities and places around the world that have built out full infrastructure where people can get around in multimodal ways. So we have sort of built ourselves into a corner here. The question is, how do we get out of it? And I think that data set, especially figuring out where we're at today and how to measure how we make progress, is really important. And finally, I think obviously we're going to have a new legislature, a new administration, new department directors all around in a few months here. So if we can set these tools up to be able to hand over to the next crew that takes over, that's probably the best that we can do for the little time we all have left before things change. So I just want to really mahalo everybody for the discussion and look forward to seeing things unfold from here. I think someone had messaged on the computer here.
Thank you, Senator Lee. Let's see, we've got okay. We really have reached, I think, close to the end of our time. Amy, go ahead, Representative Peruso.
Yeah, so thank you so much. I realize that you're constrained for time, and I too am running between meetings, but I did want to step in because this issue is so important to my constituents, and we are constantly having conversations around equity in terms of access to better walkways, bikeways, public transportation, transit facilities, and I really see the toolkit as a really important step in the right direction. So I just wanted to applaud you folks for your efforts and to say thank you, and I hope to continue supporting the Safe Routes to School work.
Thank you, Representative. Department of Health, CJ.
So, hey, everybody, I'm, as most of you know, I'm no longer officially Department of Health, but since there was nobody here, I just want to put it on record that that the VMT toolkit, as it's been discussed, and as the Department of Health participated in it, is aligned with the Department of Health's Healthy Hawaii Strategic Plan 2030, which has essentially 4 goals around built environment. That's increasing bike miles, increasing pedestrian safety access, land use transformations to walkability, things like that. And then the 4th one is specifically that the state and the counties will develop VMT, specifically will develop strategies to address VMT. So again, I'm not officially speaking for the DOH anymore, but I know that the DOH is very much in support of the VMT, and as am I as a private citizen. So thank you.
Thank you very much, CJ. Okay, anybody else? I see Leah from Kauai. Go ahead, Leah.
Aloha mai kākou. Just really quickly, I wanted to add and remind everybody that the VMT reduction was integrated back in 2012 in our Kauai multimodal land transportation plan, particularly in the forecast and future scenarios. The preferred scenario, which assumes that our total VMT on Kauai would remain at the 2010 levels through 2035. Still looking at that, and since then, these goals and policies were subsequently integrated into our county general plans and our community plans, which we are almost done with our rounds of community plan updates for Kauai. So I'm very happy that this is coming online. It is a toolkit again, and at the end of the day, it will be about measurements and design. So thank you and for the work, and mahalo.
Thank you, Leah. It's good to hear from Kauai. I know Ka'aina was on the call earlier, and he may still be here. And we are looking forward to the Hawaii County Congress of Planning Officials Conference in Kauai in September. So I'm sure you'll have some exciting sessions that relate to these topics.
Actually, we have a whole track on climate change, and registration is open. So www.hcpo2022.com. Thank you.
Good pickup, Leah. Okay. Is there another? in the chat. Asia, I'd like to add that EPA support for VMT reductions to reduce greenhouse gas sequestration, greenhouse gases. And thank you to the Climate Commission for working on the VMT toolkit. And there are some other comments in the chat. Lauren Armstrong from Maui, thank you for putting together the VMT toolkit. It will help Maui Metropolitan Planning Organization set targets and program projects toward our goal of reducing greenhouse gas emissions and improving everyone's access to daily needs. Okay. All right, thank you. I want to thank all of you for attending this meeting. It's right in the middle of the legislative session, and we all, have been working harder than ever on these issues. But thank you all. Our next meeting will be in July. My co-chair, Suzanne Case, will be chairing that meeting. Co-chair, did you want to make any comments?
We're going to confirm the date. We might adjust a little bit.
Okay.
We'll confirm it.
All right. That we'll send out a notice to save the date at a later time. So, but we'll take suggestions for topics that you want to see us address in that meeting. And perhaps because it'll be during the interim session, we'll have a little, it'll be maybe perhaps a little more relaxed session. Okay, thank you all. We're going to go ahead and close the meeting.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Hello, everybody.
Okay. Go ahead.
Thank you.
Thank you.